Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by WhatIf on Wattpad. Now let's start. Not every man is created equal. 80% of the people in the world are blessed to have a quirk while the remaining 20% don't. In a world full of quirks, heroes and villains occur. In a place somewhere in 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐻, Japan, a green-haired boy walks the streets. He has matching color of green hair and eyes. But his most notable feature in the boy's face is his 4 freckles on each cheek, seemingly aligned in a diamond. This boy is Izuku Midoriya, 14 years of age. He is a shy, timid middle school student of Aldera Middle School. He is smart, kind, and always thinks of others before himself. Growing up, he always aspired to become a hero after watching All Might and other heroes appear in TV. He always wants to be a hero to save others with a smile on his face, like All Might. That's why he was so excited to get his quirk back when he was 4. Only to know he wasn't going to get one. At the age of 4, Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless. From that point on, his life went downhill quick. His mom became distant, his dad left them for work and hasn't come back since. His friend, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫𝐭, hits him with his explosion quirk and starts calling him Deku. Izuku endured all the beatings and insults his friend had did to him, thinking the ash blonde will become an amazing hero even after being literally beaten to the ground by the young 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽. But even the nicest person snaps, and Izuku, for instance, grew tired of becoming his punching bag and for once stood up for himself. In class, Katsuki decided to torment Izuku, who was silently writing in his hero journal number 13 before the class could even start. He and his lackeys surround the quirkless boy with his 2 lackeys on each side of the desk while 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 was in front. Seeing Izuku didn't notice them, the blonde boy, being a jerk, tried blasting the hero journal while Izuku was still writing on the desk. However, he didn't expect Izuku to slap his hand away from the desk, redirecting the explosion to one of his lackeys who was idiotically standing at the side of the greenette's desk, knocking him unconscious to the wall. All of that while he was still writing on his notebook. Good thing Izuku was sitting at the far back corner of the class and no one got hit, well, except the lackey, of course. Still shell-shocked, 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 tried again and Izuku did the same thing, only doing the opposite side, this time hitting the other lackey who was thrown back to a nearby desk and collapsed at the ground groaning. 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 was shocked and fuming to see Deku dodging/misdirecting his attacks with ease. The worst part of it was the quirkless loser did it like it was nothing. Enraged by this, he pulled the boy's collar and threw a nasty right hook, only to be dodged. Izuku dodged the punch after experiencing the attack for almost 10 years, countered by punching the blonde square to his nose, breaking it in the process, shocking the class that the quirkless loser had just punched the strongest kid in class. Some students silently cringed knowing Izuku wouldn't survive this one, while others praised him for stepping up and fighting back against the bully. The blonde looked at Izuku while clutching his bleeding, broken nose. The greenette looked at him in a blank face, but he knew that in his eyes that the quirkless boy was mocking him. This only angered 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 even more, using his quirk to propel himself in front of the greenette, tackling him to the floor and beating him to a pulp. Izuku tried his best to block the attacks, but 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 having a quirk is really hard to defend against, not until a teacher entered the room. The teacher saw the unconscious lackeys laying on the floor with burn marks and 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 on top of a beaten-up Izuku. He quickly brought Izuku, 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽, and his lackeys to the school clinic. After getting their injuries patched up, 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 and Izuku were escorted to the principal's office to get an explanation about what just occurred. As usual, 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 would bend the truth and tell the principal that Izuku started the fight, thinking Izuku would just stutter his explanation into making himself look guilty. Like always. That is when Izuku looked the principal straight in the eye and told him what had really happened, which surprised the principal. This made 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 widen his eyes as Izuku not only didn't stutter a storm but also ratted him out. Hearing both of their sides, the principal decided to suspend both of them. Izuku and the lackeys will be suspended for 2 weeks and 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐽 for 3 weeks, and after the suspension the latter will be attending anger management sessions after class. Izuku has the shorter suspension since he only attacked in self-defense. The lackeys were suspended for trying to participate in tormenting the quirkless boy, mind the word trying since they didn't get a chance to do anything. And finally, 𝐒𝐮𝐩𝐸𝐵 has the longest since he not only instigated the fight, he also used his quirk in a public area, damaged school property and caused injuries to Midoriya, and the anger management session speaks for itself. After the talk with the principal, Izuku was excused to go home first since letting the two go back to class will only cause more problems. Izuku bowed to the principal and asked forgiveness before going home. After a couple of minutes, he let 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵 to go back to class to fetch his things and go home. As the blonde left with a scowl on his face, the principal had smile internally. Seeing as the once shy, timid, quirkless boy had just stepped up to his bully and even managed to hit him. Still thinking about the green-haired boy, the principal went to his computer and opened Izuku Midoriya's student profile where you can see his records having so much dirt on it with violations he clearly didn't even do. Looking at the file, he quickly removed the bad remarks about the boy and typed in the remarks that should have been there the whole time. He didn't really want to put bad remarks on the greenette's record, but being quirkless made the principal fear what could happen to the boy if he became a hero. And seeing the boy's kind and timid personally made the principal to do everything, even to put dirt on the boy's record just to keep him out of danger caused by the heroics department. But seeing how he had deflected the explosion and punched the strongest student in Aldra, he showed passion and bravery that only a hero would have. The principal had to trust the boy on his decision to be a hero. The boy deserved to have a shot at the UA entrance exams. Finished in editing the greenette's file, he saved it and placed it back to the folder named UA Applicants, where there are only 2 of them there: Izuku Midoriya and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. He knew these 2 will become great heroes and only time will tell. After collecting his stuff and exiting the campus, Izuku decided not go home just yet. It was still early and going home this early would make his mom ask him questions he wouldn't really want to answer just now. So he decided to go walk around the streets of Mustafu. He walked under a bridge when an eerie voice echoed from behind him. "Well, what do we have here? A medium-sized disguise." He looked back to see a mucky green sludge creature towering over him. He felt fear overcome him as the sludge villain wrapped itself onto him. A villain, he thought as the sludge villain forced himself into his mouth and throat. Izuku could feel his throat burn as the bile liquid forcefully made way through his throat. He could hear the villain laugh and tell him to keep quiet before he could find him. But Izuku didn't care to listen as he did his best to claw out the sludge off him to no avail. "Have no fear." The greenette blacked out when the manhole burst open and came out a bulky blonde man. "For I am here." The sludge villain flinched when the man reeled his fist back in a punching movement. Texas, smash. The punch went through the sludge villain, but the wind pressure blew away the sludge, freeing the unconscious boy. Izuku woke up when he felt repeated slapping on his cheek. Groggily waking up, he there sees the number 1 hero himself, All Might. He freaked out and frantically looked for his hero journal only to see it open, on All Might's page, with a signature. Izuku felt overjoyed that the man he had always adored signed his journal. He turned to say thank you when he saw the man on a jumping pose. And then a thought came into his mind and quickly ran to the hero. He grabbed onto the man's leg as the flew up. The man noticed a weight on his leg, and when he looked at his leg, he saw Izuku, with hair and mouth getting hit by the wind. He asked the boy to let go, only to be told that if the boy let go he would die. Seeing no point of debating and feeling his limit coming, they landed on a nearby rooftop, not noticing a bottle filled with sludge fell off the hero's pocket. As they land on the rooftop, Izuku tried to balance himself after getting disoriented. It was too much for his scrawny body and it almost made him puke. All Might was about to leap away when Izuku stopped him. Can a quirkless person become a hero? The question made the hero stop on his tracks. Izuku began to shyly talk about how being a hero and helping people had always been his dream, but he was quirkless. As Izuku was rambling, he didn't notice All Might's body began to emit smoke and slowly turn skinny. Izuku turned to the hero's direction only to see a skinny blonde man. The boy freaked out once again, but the man quickly shut him off by explaining how he got in his current condition. All Might then began telling Izuku how difficult a life of a pro hero is and how it would be even more dangerous for a quirkless person to be in that line of work. And how being a policeman or firefighter would be a better fit for Izuku if he really wanted to help people. With a last look at the downcasted boy, All Might left the building and noticed the bottle where the villain was in become missing. He began to get nervous when an explosion echoed to on the next block. Feeling nervous, he rushed towards the place where the explosion came from. After that encounter with All Might, Izuku didn't felt like going home for a moment. Instead of going straight to their apartment, he decided to go to a place where he has always felt free. He decided to go to the Dagoba Beach Municipal Park. Even though it was basically a junkyard now, he liked to sitting on the sand and just listen to the waves crashing into each other. He always go to the place every time he tried to run away from Bakugo or if he had an argument with his mom. The beach may be filled with trash and junk, but Izuku used the place to calm himself and think clearly. As Izuku took a right turn in an alleyway for a shortcut, a red blur suddenly grabbed him and placed a hand over his mouth. "Don't even dare make a sound or you'll get it," the man whispered in a yell, pressing Izuku's face harder with his hand while showing red lightning on his other hand near the greenette's face, scaring the boy. The man pulled the boy in the alleyway while looking in every direction, trying to see if someone will come to the alley. Izuku began shaking in fear, not really liking the fact that he had been captured by a villain twice in one day. Thrice if you count the Pomeranian that uses sweat as explosives. Not really my lucky day, eh? He thought sarcastically as he was dragged by the man. Looking at the man, Izuku can see that the man is wearing an orange shirt and pants, letting the boy to guess that the man is a prisoner that escaped. He was trying to think of a way to escape the man's grasp when his eyes darted towards the man's other hand that had red lightning flowing on the limb. Izuku observed the flowing energy and was mesmerized by it, and he don't know why, but he can feel that the lightning is calling to him, or he may have gotten his head hit hard because he is probably hallucinating. Just as Izuku was about to touch the lightning, why though? He was hallucinating probably. When a voice called out from behind them, "Let the kid go, Akira." A voice said from the side, making Izuku look at the direction of the voice. In the other end of the alleyway there Izuku saw a tall man wearing a red beanie, white hoodie over a red flannel shirt, a bright blue denim jeans and a denim vest on top of the hoodie. The man has a chain wrapped around his right forearm as a bracelet. Izuku noticed that the man's hands were glowing a bright orange and smoke was coming out of the man's hands, easily indicating that his hands are hot. Is that his quirk? Izuku thought. He slightly yelped when the man's lightning-covered hand came an inch from the boy's face. "Stay back, Delsin, or this kid gets it." The escapee yelled at the beanie-wearing man, trying to keep the man from coming closer. The man now known as Delsin looked at Izuku, who teared up slightly, shaking and frightened for his life. He then looked back at the hostage-taker. "Akira, you need to calm down, let the kid go and let's talk about this," he said, slowly walking towards the two. "I ain't going back to jail." The now known Akira yelled at the beanie-wearing man as he held Izuku tighter, earning another yelp from Izuku. "You're not. Let the kid go and we'll work this out," Delsin pleaded. Akira didn't budge and just moved his hand closer to the boy's face, close enough for some of the lightning to slightly shocking the boy. Izuku was surprised by the shock, but instead of getting hurt, he felt tickled him. He looked at the man in the end of the alleyway, Delsin, and stared at the man's eyes. The man stared back at the boy and saw that the boy was calm. He saw Izuku's hand slowly lifting up and immediately knew what the boy was about to do. "Don't do it," he yelled, running at the boy and Akira. The latter, seeing Delsin move, pushed his lightning-covered hand to Izuku, only to be surprised as Izuku grabbed his hand. Izuku felt a slight jolt over his body, but it didn't hurt. He noticed the lightning just went through his body and it felt ticklish at first, then a wave of unfamiliar memories entered his mind. In his mind, he saw the man's life. His name is Akira Takahashi, 37-year-old man from Tokyo. A conduit and villain that had been running away from city to city. Theft and attempted murder. He had been caught by Delsin 3 days ago, but escaped after the vehicle was hit by an explosion in the nearby street. The memories were cut off when Delsin was in front of the man and punched him with a smoke-covered punch. Akira was thrown back and it made his grip on Izuku loosen up and the boy fell down on the ground, still dazed by the sudden flow of memories. Before Akira could go back up, concrete slabs began to surround him and completely encase him, leaving his head out. He tried to move his body and use his lightning when he couldn't feel his power. He was about to yell at Delsin when a punch landed on his face, knocking him out. The smoke user diverted his attention to the still shell-shocked teen. He slowly approached Izuku and reached out a hand in front of the boy. "Need a hand, kid?" he said at the boy, who was snapped out of his daze and looked at the hand and at the man. Delsin gave him a small smile, but deep inside he was worried about the kid. He just witnessed the boy grab a lightning cover hand and was somehow dazed by it. He wondered if the kid had an electric resistance quirk, because he tanked the shock like it was nothing. Izuku slowly reached out to the outstretched hand and nodded at the man. "Why, thank you for save." He was cut off when smoke suddenly came out of the man's hand as he held it and another wave of unfamiliar memories entered his mind once more. Delsin Rowe. The Banner Man, 30 years old, Native American from the 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐽𝐻 tribe. A conduit, vigilante/freedom fighter and the savior of Seattle. Had came to Japan to hunt down Akira, who had been in the wanted list of Delsin and his gang, 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐽𝐻𝐽 and 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐻𝐫𝐭. Captured Akira but got struck by an explosion from a nearby street and gave chase on the escaping bioterrorist. Delsin saw the smoke come out of his arm and was about to pull it away from the green-haired boy, when said boy lost consciousness and began falling down. He barely caught the boy and slowly leaned him on the wall. Delsin knew exactly what happened and was in a mix of being skeptical, worried, and happy. Skeptical because he could never know if the boy would choose to use his abilities for good or evil. He didn't know the boy and he had just been converted into a conduit, or bioterrorists are a subspecies of humans who possess superhuman abilities afforded to them by the presence of the conduit gene. Worried, because he knew that conduits don't get the best treatment even after his good deeds back in Seattle. There are people who hated conduits and most of them are people with powers called quirks, seemingly out of envy and a buttload of superiority complexes in their asses. Conduits are treated as villains and received the same treatment like those who are quirkless, maybe even worse. So the boy's life will go downhill after this encounter. Though even if he was skeptical and worried, he is feeling happy. Not really knowing why, but looking at the bravery the kid showed earlier, he can see that the boy had guts and had a heart of a hero. He then noticed a notebook on the ground, picked it up and flipped through its pages. To say he was impressed was an understatement. The notes were in detail and specified the uses of quirks of Japan's pro-heroes. Delsin looked at the sleeping form of the kid and smiled. He had decided he would help this kid to become a hero and master his new conduit abilities. He may not know the kid personally, but looking at the notes and his reckless yet brave act earlier, the kid is destined for greatness. And maybe, just maybe, this kid would make the world change their view on conduits. Delsin then closed the book and saw his name. Izuku Midoriya. He looked at the teen and smiled. He was going to help the boy. After all, conduits look out for one another. In a dark place, our main protagonist opens his eyes to see two faint lights flickering in front of him. Confused and slightly nervous is his emotions, remembering that he was supposed to be in an alleyway. How did he get here? Where is he anyways? Standing up, he glanced towards the flickering lights, shining like Christmas lights. It feels like they're calling me, he thought as he looked around. As he wondered where the heck is he flinched when the lights suddenly zoomed its way toward his face, stopping only a few inches away from him. He backed away from it, looking at it. The lights were in a shape of orbs. They are same in shape and size, but different in color and aspect, it shows. One has dark orange hue, comparable with the color of sunrise. This orb has white and black smoke covering and circling around it. The other orb is showing an electric blue hue. Noticing the blue lightning and cold smoke coming from the orb, he concluded that this shows an aspect of lightning and ice combined into one. For a couple of minutes, he stared at the orbs. Izuku was so lost in thought that he didn't notice his left and right hand slowly rises at the orange and blue orb, respectively. As the greenette touched the orbs, a surge of power suddenly entered his body. His left side feeling heat while his right feels tingly and cold. However, He can feel his right side begins to heat up for a bit until it was the same as his left side. He looked at his hands and noticed that they were glowing orange and smoke was surrounding it. Just imagine Izuku smiling instead of Delsin. Izuku can't explain why, but he couldn't stop himself from smiling at the power he was feeling right now. But a part of him was saddened. He knew to himself that he was only dreaming and this will be gone as soon as he woke up. So before he woke up, he was about to use this power as long as he is still sleeping. Izuku began to channel the power on his hand and experimented on it. He tried running with the smoke covering him and he found himself to be faster. He can also phase through objects as long as the object has holes or spaces where smoke can travel or go through, using the steel screen barriers and vents that somehow appeared out of nowhere. He can also shoot ball of smoke. It took him 3 tries for him to shoot smoke from his hands. He even made a larger one, but causes too much energy. When Izuku tried to use the large blast, he couldn't produce the right amount and collapsed to the ground, panting. Suddenly, a strange symbol appeared in front of Izuku. Sorry if the picture is low quality, I just took and edited this from a gameplay video. The smoke-like markings are short. Maybe this is the amount of energy of the power. He mumbled as he shakily stood up, still panting. As he was about to move, a figure appeared in front of him. Izuku was startled and fell onto his back. He stared at the figure in front of him, which was only a shadow. Izuku began shaking in fear, when the figure began releasing lightning energy and walked towards him. The figure stopped a feet away from Izuku and knelt on his level. The man said in a distorted way. Izuku couldn't understand what the figure had said. He was about to ask what the person in front of him was saying when he was shook out of the dream. Izuku groggily opens his eyes and slowly sat up. He had headache from the craziest dream just experienced. Man, that was a crazy dream. He mumbled to himself as he rubbed his temples, not noticing the man standing in front of him. What kind of dream, kid? Izuku flinched, now noticing the man who had saved his life, Delsin Rowe. He was leaning on a wall with the boy's hero journal on his right hand. The man was looking at the boy with a smile. "And Mr. Delsin Rowe, thank you for saving me," Izuku said as he bowed rapidly and repeatedly. Delsin's sweat dropped at the boy's stutters. "Don't sweat it, kid. I'm happy to help." He then handed the notebook to the stuttering teen. "I think this is yours." Izuku looked at the outstretched notebook and saw that it was his hero journal. He slowly took and bowed again, thanking the man for the nth time for saving his life. The conduit just laughed at the boy's awkwardness. "You're one awkward kid, aren't you?" Delsin said, causing the boy to stop bowing and scratch the back of his neck sheepishly. "Say, your hero journal is interesting, kid. Do you plan on becoming a hero?" he asked the boy, who noticeably changed from sheepish to gloom in seconds. "Yeah, I was planning on applying for the hero course in UA. But I can't be a hero since I'm quirkless." Izuku said the last part in a whisper, but Delsin was able to hear it. "What are you talking about, kid? You can be a hero even without a ka." He was cut off when Izuku interrupted him, tears streaming down his cheeks. "No. I can't become a hero without a quirk. That's what 𝐀𝐮 and All Might said." Izuku snapped at Delsin, who was shocked to see the boy crying. "No one believed that I can be a hero even if I am quirkless. Hell, not even my believes in me." Izuku collapsed onto his knees and cried. He wasn't having a great day. He just got his butt kicked by Bakugo and got suspended for fighting back. He was saved from a villain twice this day and his dreams was crushed by his idol. The dream he had about having a strong power only made his dreams unreachable. He knew well that he wasn't going to get a quirk sometime soon and the entrance exams was only 10 months away. He was just going to embarrass himself trying to go into the best hero school in Japan without a quirk. Izuku was still crying when the man in front of him sighed, making him look. There he saw Delsin rubbing the bridge of his nose and groaning some words. "Arg. Of course that blonde idiot would say that," Delsin said, making Izuku look at him in shock. "Why, you know All Might?" Izuku asked in between sniffles. The man looked at him with a deadpan. "Know him? Yeah, I know that blonde idiot. I even fought him once." This caught Izuku's attention. "You have fought All Might?" the boy asked with wide eyes. Delsin looked at the boy and gave him a smirk. "Of course. I clapped that blonde idiot's butt cheeks and he couldn't keep me down for 3 seconds. He triumphantly said as he remembered his fight against the #1 hero 3 years ago when he was tracking 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿, who was still lying on the ground unconscious. "Let's say I won that fight. It barely was a fight anyway." He thought and looked at Izuku. "Why, you're kidding, right?" the boy asked the man who just looked at the boy straight in the eyes. "Did I stutter?" he simply said, proving his point. Izuku's eyes widened and jaw dropped. He just met All Might and the person who beat him and was saved by both. He was about to talk when the banner man talked first. "Anyway, Midoriya, you can be a hero even without a quirk." He saw Izuku open his mouth and quickly cut him off. "And don't listen to what All Might says, just because he's the #1 hero that doesn't mean that he's always right. Don't let what other people say pull your dreams down. The only person who can determine your future is you and only you." Delsin said as he pointed at Izuku, who was in a mix of shell shock and in awe at the man's words. "And can't be a hero without a quirk. I fought villains and All Might quirkless and I still win." That confused Izuku. "You don't use your quirk in battle?" Izuku asked while tilting his head, making Delsin chuckle at the childish gesture. "No. I don't even have a quirk in the first place," he said, grinning like a madman at the boy. It took a solid 8 seconds for Izuku to react at what he said. "Huh!" Izuku exclaimed, earning a chuckle from the man. He was so confused about this. Is he messing with him? For sure he was the man use a smoke/fire quirk earlier. Izuku was still confused when he remembered the memories that he saw when he touched Delsin's hand. "Conduit. Delsin's a conduit." "You're a conduit," Izuku said to the man who smirked at the boy, confirming his claim. "Yes, I'm a conduit," Delsin said while nodding as he looked at the boy straight in the eyes. "And so are you." Izuku blinked once. He blinked again. And again. Before 𝐻𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐻𝐿. "I'm a conduit?" Izuku asked incredulously while pointing at himself, earning a nod from the man. He looked down before asking. "𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿. Well, you seems to have an inactive conduit gene like me. And through exposure or contact with conduits those genes became active, making you into a conduit." The older conduit paused before saying, "After I touched your hand, my smoke powers were copied into your genes, Izuku. Meaning you now have smoke manipulation in your arsenal." That made the boy nod. Izuku then remembered his dream and now know what the orange orb symbolizes, smoke. That is when he remembered the blue orb. It was lightning. "Does that mean I also have his lightning powers?" Izuku asked as he looked at the unconscious criminal. It had made sense that I got his lightning powers since I touched his hand, but why is the orb blue and has ice? He thought as he looked back at Delsin. "Yes, but I don't have an idea in using lightning since I don't have it," Delsin said, then looked at Akira. "And I'm sure that he won't say a thing about it." Izuku nodded. "But here's my proposition," the older smoke user said, making Izuku look at him. "In 2 weeks, I'll be leaving to go back to America. So tomorrow, same time, meet me in Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. I'll help you master your smoke abilities," he said as he grabbed Akira Takahashi and turned away. "I'll wait for you," he said, walking 2 steps, only for Izuku to call back to him. "I'll go there tomorrow morning, Mr. Delsin, sir," Izuku yelled out, making Delsin look back at him with a raised eyebrow. "I thought you have classes tomorrow morning," the smoke conduit asked. Izuku just scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "I kinda got myself suspended for fighting back to a bully and breaking his nose," the green-haired boy said, emphasizing the word bully. Izuku saw Delsin's face turn blank, making him nervous all of a sudden. Suddenly, Delsin had a smirk on his face. Did it felt good? Was the punch satisfying? He asked the boy who looked at him in confusion, but when he caught up to what the man was saying, also smirked. "The man right it was," Izuku said as both conduits laughed, before going their separate ways. Izuku began walking towards home with a smile that he felt was gone after his diagnosis. He was now given a chance to prove himself that he can be a hero, a quirkless hero. He is a conduit, and tomorrow, Delsin Rowe, The banner man himself will train him 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 his smoke powers. His lightning was not a priority for now. He'll just train it when he got into UA. No, scratch that, when he's in UA. Kinda cocky, but can you blame him? He parried 2 explosions from 𝐾𝐮𝐭, no from Katsuki, and broke the Pomeranian's nose while being quirkless, and later at the same day he became a conduit, met the bannerman and became his student for 2 weeks. Let him have this. His confidence somehow was raised after the encounter with Delsin and is really grateful he met the guy. He was snapped out of his daydream when an ambulance rang and sped past by him in a fast pace. Looks like someone else got caught in a villain attack. He mumbled to himself and continued walking home, not realizing that he knew who the person in the ambulance was. As our green-haired protagonist entered the apartment, he was met by his mother, Izuku Midoriya. She was standing on the entrance with crossed arms and a disappointed expression on her face. "Izuku Midoriya," she said, making him take a step back. She never calls him by his full name, and when she does, he's F. "Care to explain why you got 2 weeks suspension? And where have you been?" she asked, looking at Izuku straight in the eye. She thought Izuku would look away as usual when she asked him about school, but to her surprise her son didn't look away and stared back at her, making her flinch slightly. "I got 2 weeks suspension because I defended myself from bullies and broke Casey Katsuki's nose. To why I'm late, I got caught between 2 different villain attacks, with the latter one knocked me unconscious. Don't worry, I was healed by the hero," he said, lying about the last part as he kicked off his shoes and walked past his mom, who was still shocked that his son didn't even stutter. That is when the words registered in her mind. "Wait. You broke Kakatsuki's nose. Why? You two are friends, are it?" she stuttered out. She was confused at why would Izuku do such a thing to Katsuki, they're friends, right? Izuku stopped and looked back at his mother. "No, Mom. We're not friends. We weren't friends anymore since he got his quirk and I didn't. He started bullying me since we were 4, got mad at me just because I tried to help him up after he fell off to a river, called me names and used his quirk on me just to prove his point." He paused to take a deep breath before continuing. "I punched him in the face, since I had enough, and as an act of self-defense since he pulled the trigger first by using his quirk on me when I wasn't even doing anything to annoy him. To why I didn't tell you, I don't know. I was too focused on getting our friendship back when it can't be fixed because of his ego," Izuku said, and waited for his mom's response. He was surprised when his mother ran towards him and hugged him. "I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry, I didn't know." She apologized to him and cried on his chest. Izuku could only hug her back as patted her back to calm her down before she flooded the apartment. After calming his mom down, Izuku told her about his day, even the encounter with All Might and Delsin. But he wasn't gonna tell his mom about what All Might had told him and wasn't gonna tell her he's a conduit until he's ready. He don't know what his mom would felt about him being a conduit, or some would call it bioterrorist. As his mom left him to make dinner, he entered his room and immediately cringed at the amount of All Might merch he had in his room. Not even hesitating, he quickly removed all of it, as in all of it. After his encounter with the hero and hearing his dream get crushed by the man, he was convinced that the man wasn't worth the amount of money spent on merch. Though he still admired the man's reason to be a hero, he knew DMN well that the man wasn't different from those who told him that he couldn't be a hero without a quirk. After 10 minutes of removing all the merch, his room was bare and looked dead. But better this than a room filled with the face of the person who rejected his dream. He has 2.5 medium boxes of All Might merch and planned to sell them to collectors to earn money to buy new clothes and interior designs for his now plain room. Izuku was about to open his computer to look for All Might merch collectors when his mom's voice was heard from the door. He was confused by what that was about but shrugged it off. He continued browsing when he found someone who likes to collect All Might merch. The person was called Mirai Sasaki or something. Izuku contacted the person, showed the items and had came up with a price before accepting the offer. He was going to meet the man before going to the beach tomorrow. Feeling thirsty, Izuku walked towards the door to get a drink. As he exited his room, he overheard his mom on the phone. "Mitsuki, calm down. I can't understand what you're saying. Will you slow it down?" 𝐮𝐻𝐸 said to the person on the other side of the line, which was Katsuki's mother. Izuku hadn't saw her since he was 8. "How is she?" Izuku continued to the kitchen to get a glass of water when his mom spoke once more. What? What happened to Katsuki? That made Izuku stop on his tracks. He looked at the direction of his mom. She was in the living room. He got attacked by a villain. Izuku's eyebrows raised at that. So he also got attacked by a villain? The green-haired boy shrugged it off before continuing to the kitchen to get his glass of water. After drinking the water, he walked back to his room only to meet his mom walking towards his room. His mom saw him and quickly walked towards him, with a worried expression on her face. Izuku, Katsuki was attacked by a villain earlier this afternoon. 𝐮𝐭 said to her son, only for him to blink. Oh, I know. I heard you when I was getting my glass of water, he said nonchalantly. 𝐮𝐭 didn't question his son's reaction and just told him that they were going to visit him tomorrow on the hospital. Izuku looked at her for a second and shook his head. Sorry, Mom, but I'm going to meet someone tomorrow. I can't go to the hospital, he said, wishing for his mom to not force him on going to the hospital, since he didn't really want to see Katsuki after what had happened in school earlier. But he got attacked by a villain. She was cut off when Izuku interjected. I also got attacked today. Twice, he said, trying not to raise his voice. He really wanted to escape this conversation. But you're free. She was again cut off by Izuku, who had enough of the conversation. He's not my friend. And he will never be. After everything to me making up with him will only lead to me getting blasted by an explosion-enhanced punch. He walked past her and opened the door of his room. Before entering, he stopped at the door and looked back at his mom, who was now crying. It broke his heart to see his mom like this, but he wanted to be selfish for once on his life. If you want to see him, then go. I don't give a damn about him getting attacked and ended up in the hospital, because frankly he deserved it. Good night, he said as he slammed the door. Izuku leaned on the door and heard footsteps going away from his room. He knew that his mom went to her room and was crying. He felt bad for yelling at his mom and he knew he shouldn't have done that, but hearing her worry about his bully for 10 years and disregarding what he said literally 15 minutes ago just because the angry Pomeranian was in the hospital. He knew that this was going to be awkward in the morning, so he was going to sleep early tonight to wake up early in the morning to go to the meeting place tomorrow. These All Might merch needs to go. And after that, he'll meet up with Delsin in Dagobah Beach. He promised Izuku that he will train the boy to install the smoke powers to become a hero. As he lay on the bed, a thought then struck him. Who's the shadow figure in my dream earlier? He thought before letting his eyes close, leading him to slumber. Who would have thought that 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 was an All Might fanboy? Our green-haired protagonist said to himself as he counted his money and placed it in his wallet. He just sold all of his All Might merch to a person named Mirai Sasaki, and to his surprise the buyer was 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸. He was shocked and surprised that he had sold his collections to a pro hero, who always has a stoic and intimidating appearance that caused the hero fanboy to stiffen and sweat profusely. Izuku only calmed down when the man handed him a white envelope and quickly took the box of merch and dashed away, leaving a confused yet amused Izuku. The envelope was heavy, and when Izuku opened it, he had to stop his eyes from budging out of its sockets. The money earned is plenty enough to buy himself an apartment, had he wishes to move out, buy new furniture and still have money left. He was on why the money he received was a lot higher than what the hero had offered. The greenette quickly realized that it was probably bribery, to keep him from revealing to the public about the hero's somewhat weird addiction. Izuku shrugged the thought off his head. Even if he tell the public about the man's hobby, no one would believe him. Izuku just mentally thanked the man's generosity. Kinda ridiculous how the pro hero was very generous. Really generous. He almost went hero fanboy mode when he forcefully stopped himself from freaking out. It would be embarrassing for him to mutter out loud and creep out the hero. Izuku took a deep breath and calmly asked for an autograph, which the hero gave, by the way. Izuku is now currently walking his way towards Dagobah Beach Municipal Park to meet up with Delsin, who promised to train him control his powers. He was excited to learn to master the power of smoke and try to use lightning. Remembering the two orbs in his dream, he was now sure that the orbs represents the two conduit powers he have. The orange orb is Delsin's powers and the blue orb is Akira's power. Maybe it was blue instead of red. which confused the young Conduit but set it aside for future questions. He arrived in his destination, and what caught his eye is the piles and piles of junk in the supposedly appealing beach. There are plastic, scraps, broken bottle, appliances and cars. Some are still smoking and others are on fire. Izuku had to cover his nose at the tough smell of burning RBB colliding with the salty breeze of the ocean. But no Delsin to be found, that is, when an explosion in the left part of the beach made Izuku flinch in surprise and fright. He quickly ran towards the source of the explosion and saw Delsin with his arm outstretched and smoking. Izuku looked at the direction where the man was looking and saw a car. Doors bent and busted, glass shards scattered on the sand, engine smoking but surprisingly not exploding for some reason, and the body of the car was now covered in dents, holes and soot. Izuku looked at the man who had noticed him and grinned at his direction. "Hey kid, how long you been there?" Delsin asked the boy as he walked towards Izuku. Said boy just straightened himself and gave the man a small smile. "I just got here, Mr. Delsin." Delsin just gave him a small laugh and softly slapped the boy's back. Izuku almost fell off, if it weren't for the small amount of strength and balance he placed on his legs. "No mister. Just call me Delsin. I'm not the one for formalities," the older Conduit said as he pulled the boy with his arm on Izuku's shoulder. They walked past the still smoking car and came close, but not too close to a screen barrier. "Now that you're here, let's start your Conduit training," he said as he let go of the boy and walked toward the screen barrier. Putting a hand over the barrier, Delsin looked back at the boy. "When I first became a Conduit, the first thing I did was use Smoke Dash. It allows me to turn into a cloud of smoke and helps me move faster." After saying that, Delsin took steps toward Izuku before facing the screen barrier. Izuku looked over as Delsin's body turned into a cloud of smoke, and with a quick move, he passed through the barrier and now formed on the other side of the barrier. The older Conduit turned around and gave Izuku a grin. "With this ability, you will be able to pass through any obstacle as long as the obstacle is half solid or has holes on it." Delsin smiled and looked at the smoking car. "Before doing that, you need to absorb smoke to keep your energy and as fuel for the super cool stuff you will be doing." Izuku nodded dumbly as he stared at the burning car, then at Delsin. "So, how do I do it?" he asked the man. "To be honest, I don't know," he said as he placed a thoughtful expression on his face. "To me, I just felt natural. After getting my powers from Hank, it felt like the smoke is calling out to me." Remembering the time he became a Conduit. After that encounter with Hank, it all came naturally. Also, with the help of the blast relays scattered all over Seattle, that time it was easy. Maybe just focus and imagine yourself absorbing the smoke with the palm of your hands, he said as he looked at the green-haired boy and had the urge to sweat drop when he saw the boy in a muttering spree. Though the words he was saying was useful, it was creepy. And some of it so outright ridiculous, hearing the boy compare himself to an anteater or a vacuum. Getting impatient, Delsin walked to the greenette and flicked Izuku's forehead. Izuku yelped in surprise and slight pain as he nursed his forehead and looked at the man. "I gotta admit, your ideas are cool and all, but you don't need to mutter it out loud like that. It's kinda creepy," he said in a deadpan tone. The boy in question just blushed in embarrassment and scratched his head sheepishly. "Sorry, force of habit," he said quietly. The older Conduit just sighed. "I understand, but you need to stop that habit. Not only it's creepy, but it could also reveal your strategy and location to an enemy. So I'd suggest you that if you ever had something in mind, keep it in your mind," he said, and earning a nod from the boy. Izuku placed his index finger and thumb on his chin and thought on how about it for a second. After a bit, he looked at the smoking car and walked closer to it. When he was 1.5 meters away from it, he reached out his arm to it, with his palms facing the vehicle. He began concentrating in absorbing the smoke. "I'm a vacuum. I'm a vacuum. I'm a vacuum," he thought as he felt it, the tingling feeling in his palms. The smoke from the vehicle began to move towards him even without wind. It took a couple for the smoke to make contact with his hand, covering it with an orange glow, and it entered his limb. Izuku felt it enter his body but didn't felt it at the same time. It took him 3 to 5 seconds to completely absorb all the smoke from the car. Izuku felt different as he opened and closed his palm, trying to get use on the feeling of smoke inside him. He felt lighter, stronger and faster. Izuku then eyed on the screen barrier and thought of how Delsin did it. He covered himself in smoke and dashed through the screen. If I try to do the same thing, I can perform it as well. He thought slowly, not wanting to mutter out loud. He took a deep breath and thought of things that helps him calm down. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. He thought as smoke enveloped his body as he dashed towards the screen barrier and passed through it. Delsin, who was watching all of this happen, went wide-eyed. He just told him how to absorb smoke and was surprised to see him do it on his first try, but using smoke dash perfectly, just minutes after seeing Delsin use it was outrageous. This kid's a genius. He thought as he looked at the boy who had his eyes slowly opening. He witnessed as a smile can be seen in the face of the young Conduit. Delsin can see the pure happiness in the boy's eyes as tears began to build up on the teen's eyes. Izuku can feel the same happiness he felt back in the dream he saw on the day he met Delsin. Once again he felt strong, confident and powerful. But this time, it's no longer a dream. He will not wake up all of a sudden. This is real. This is closely near to a quirk he never had. This is the power he always wanted. The power he always needed. The power that now is his. This is his power. Izuku was snapped out of his daze as he felt Delsin move. Looked at the direction of the man, who was looking at him with pride and proud eyes. Expressions that was quite alien to the green-haired boy. The expression of a proud father to his son. The expression that he never saw on his late father. The expression that he unfortunately didn't saw in his mother's face. Delsin began laughing wholeheartedly as he walked towards Izuku and pulls the younger teen into a one-armed hug, catching the boy off guard. "You did great, kid. You learn quickly," Delsin said as he ruffled the mop of green hair on the boy's head, causing him to turn red in embarrassment. It took him 5 minutes before Delsin let go of the boy. He grinned at the boy and crossed his arms. "You did it in your first try and didn't end up getting stuck between the spaces of the screen barrier. Now, with a couple of more practice, you will be able to summon the smoke faster and use smoke dash with ease." Izuku ignored the first sentence and just thanked the man for his praise. "Now that that's out of the way, let me show you the other cool things you'd be able to use with smoke," he said to the boy, who just gave him a look of excitement and pure determination. Delsin smirked at this. The boy reminded him of himself back in the days. Young, curious, willing to learn everything in life and the drive to be a superhero. That's all that he needed to help the boy Mr. using smoke. "Now, let me show you how to dash in the air and fly using smoke." "Excuse me, Mississippi. Where is 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫𝐿's room? I'm a close friend of the patient's mother," 𝐻𝐮𝐭 asked in the front desk of the hospital. The woman in the front desk looked at a report book and began looking for the name of Izuku's tormentor. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫𝐭's room is in room 203, in the 3rd floor, the woman said. With a quick thank you, 𝐻𝐮𝐭 made her way to the elevator and pressed the button that leads to the 3rd floor. She waited quietly as the elevator ascends to the 3rd floor. She begins to think about the conversation she had last night with Izuku. She felt the pain and anger that her son had been keeping to himself when he snapped at her. 𝐻𝐮𝐭 couldn't blame him, and judging by Izuku's story, 𝐀𝐮𝐭 has been one of the reasons why he is in pain and angry since he had tormented the boy in the past 10 years. Though she heard this from Izuku, she couldn't help but feel bad for the blonde boy. The boy had been her friend's, Mitsuki's, son. She had grown fond of the boy and always thought that he and Izuku were and still best friends. Oh, how wrong she was. But she was also in the wrong here. After Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless, she had began distancing herself with her son. Taking work after work, making excuses and sometimes completely ignoring the boy. 𝐻𝐮𝐭 knew it was wrong, but she was feeling guilty and felt like it was her fault that Izuku was born quirkless. She was full of guilt and pain. She had to endure being a single mother after Izuku's father died in her son's first birthday, not even letting Izuku meet his old man. Speaking of Izuku, when she woke up this morning, her son was already awake and was carrying a box. 𝐻𝐮𝐭 was confused and was somewhat curious on what the box contains. She was about to ask the boy what the box was for but didn't get the chance as Izuku left the apartment, seemingly in a hurry. She texted Izuku, asking where he was going and got a reply of, meeting a friend. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 was contemplating if she needs to be happy because her son has a friend or worried that his son is meeting a friend, since he never talked about a friend before. Most of it was her fault for not making time for her son. She was snapped out of her thoughts when the elevator stopped and opened. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 quickly exited the elevator, not wanting it to close on her. Exiting the elevator, she began walking while looking around, searching for room 203. After a while, she is now facing the room. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 can hear muffled sobs inside the room. Hearing the voice, she can clearly tell that it was Mitsuki crying. Hesitantly, 𝐮𝐻𝐽 opened the door and entered the room. As she entered, a blur of ash blonde hair tackled her into a hug. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 unconsciously patted the back of Mitsuki Bakugo, who was uncharacteristically sobbing on the shoulder of the shorter woman. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 just pushed all her worries and problems at the side. Right now, she had her friend to comfort and some things to discuss regarding Katsuki's behavior. That's it, kid. Focus on releasing the smoke out of your arms. Delsin yelled out at Izuku, who was currently trying to perform the smoke thrusters move, allowing him to lift himself in the air in a use for mobility. Delsin Rowe wouldn't say it out loud, but he was beginning to like the boy's drive and determination to master smoke manipulation in order to be the first Conduit Pro hero. Delsin doesn't count as a hero since he is technically a vigilante and doesn't have a hero license. Though the law against illegal quirk usage doesn't really apply to people like him or Izuku, he is still a vigilante. The proud one, that is. Regardless, he is willing to help Izuku become the hero that the boy always dreamed on becoming. He knew well how hard it is to be treated badly just because of something you can't really control, since at the first days of him becoming a conduit caused a ruckus on his part, and Izuku being bullied for being quirkless is no different. Removing the negative thoughts in his mind, Delsin showed Izuku the smoke thrusters, car boost, and the variation of the smoke dash, double air dash, which allows smoke dash to be used twice in air. It had only been 1.5 hours after Izuku had tried performing smoke dash, and now he was performing the other moves quickly. To which the two latter moves the boy immediately performed with relative ease, which was really surprising to the older conduit. The smoke thrusters still needs practice and a lot of focus. According to Delsin, when performing the move, the smoke release needs to be equal for the safety of the boy. As they continue the training and seeing Izuku's ridiculously quick improvements, Delsin began to wonder how different it would have been if he didn't encounter Izuku. What would have been the chance of Izuku becoming All Might's successor? Thinking on how it would play out, Delsin had to stop a cringe from forming on his face. Izuku would have probably just painted a large target sign on his back. From all the blonde idiot's enemies, and his body wouldn't take it. That was all interrupted when a green blur zoomed overhead him. Pushing back the thoughts on his head, he looked up to see Izuku with smoke on his arms face down as the smoke was circling around his arm, propelling himself in the air. He saw the boy grin as he began changing directions and, to his surprise, even used double air dash. After approximately 5 minutes of being in the air, Izuku landed in front of the man. The greenette was smiling widely at the man, who gave him an approving nod. "You did great, kid. A bit slow, but you'll get the hang of it," he said, earning a nod from the boy. "Now that the mobility moves are out of the way, let me show you how to shoot smoke." Delsin was about to show the boy how to do it when Izuku interrupted him. "Oh, you mean like this?" Izuku said as he pointed his palms on broken cabinet. His hand began glowing as a ball of orange smoke came out of his hand and was sent to the direction of the cabinet, blowing it up into pieces. Delsin's jaw comically hit the floor. He was not expecting the boy to perform the move that easily, and surprisingly he knew it already. But how? He faced the boy and looked at him in disbelief. "How did you know that?" he asked the boy, who slightly flinched at the volume. Delsin apologized and asked him again. "Sorry. How did you know that move?" "You see, the day we met," Izuku stammered as he began fidgeting his fingers. "I had a strange dream," he said as he began telling him about the dream he had saw on the day they met. Delsin listened carefully and was in shock of hearing what the boy had dreamed about. 2 orbs. 2 powers. Orange and blue. Smoke and lightning/ice. This is interesting. I need to ask Eugene what the meaning of this means. he thought as his brain digested the information. He then looked at the boy and gave the still fidgeting boy a small smile. Well, then that speed things up, he said, making the boy raise one eyebrow. Since the remaining move besides the orbital drop and vent dash is just a different ways to use the smoke shot, it won't be hard for you to 𝐻𝐿 them. Izuku nodded and was about to practice the smoke shot when a hand landed on his shoulder. He looked back at Delsin, who looked at him with a serious expression. Hold it right there, kid. I know you wanted to 𝐻𝐿 using smoke quickly. He paused and looked at Izuku as he continued, but you seem to be low on smoke. You need to rest up and use drain smoke to fuel up, he said. As Izuku was about to talk back, Delsin gave him a slight glare. I'm serious, Izuku. You don't want to be empty on smoke. That's like not sleeping for 3 days. Trust me, he said as he cringed as he remembered passing out after using too much smoke on one day. Izuku sighed and had to agree with the older Conduit, albeit reluctantly. The man had more experience than him, and with the cringe plastered on the man's face, Izuku can tell that it was bad. They had a 30-minute break before Izuku used drain smoke to absorb more smoke. They practiced more of the abilities and had to establish locations to an abandoned warehouse that had a lot of air vents. Delsin showed him the move vent dash by using smoke dash toward the vent, and suddenly Izuku saw the man on top of the warehouse where a vent was also present. Izuku tried to do it and nailed it on the first try, probably because he is used to the usage of smoke dash. To his confusion, he didn't know why after exiting a vent he felt weird. He felt really weird. He felt a bit sus. It must have been the adrenaline, right? He and Delsin began playing vent tag as they chased each other by using vent dash from one vent to another. After chasing Delsin like forever, Izuku collapsed on the floor panting heavily. Though he using smoke dash and vent dash, he was confused why he didn't feel his smoke reserves lower. Shrugging, he placed that question for another time and stood up shakily. Oh, that was fun. The man yelled out, making his voice echo throughout the warehouse. Izuku glared at the man and crossed his arms. It was fun. He grumbled sarcastically, earning a laugh and a pat on the back from the man. Oh, come on. Don't be like that. It was a good exercise, he said to the boy, who didn't argue at that statement. Though, you need to learn how to do parkour. With powers like ours, parkour will help you become aware of your surroundings and not destroy everything in your way. Delsin began walking out of the warehouse with Izuku following not far from behind. For now, lessons are over. Let's meet tomorrow same time. Thank you for the lessons today, Delsin. It really helps, even though I wasn't able to catch you in vent tag. I admit that I enjoyed it, Izuku said, smiling at the man, who comically squinted his eyes as a ray of sunlight came out of the boy. So bright. No problem, kid. I'm happy to help. After all, conduits look out for one another, he said as he turned and walked away. See you tomorrow, Izuku. Don't be late, he said as he waved his hand. Just see you tomorrow, Izuku said as he turned to the direction of his house. Izuku looked at the sky. It was still mid-afternoon. He smiled as he rethought of all the training he had done today. In such a short amount of time, he was able to 𝐻𝐿 the smoke dash, smoke shot and drain smoke. Delsin praised him about it and even called him a prodigy and/or genius. In his opinion, he was just a fast learner. He had always been one. Last year, he was able to solve a 3x3 Rubik's Cube within 5 minutes in the first try after watching a video from YouTube. Katsuki, however, said it was useless in the hero works. All of his talents are useless in the hero works. Though, it didn't really bother him. It was too pathetic to argue about it. As he arrived their apartment and entered it, Izuku walked straight to his room. He needed to take a shower and get some rest. Entering his room, he fished out his wallet and phone out of the pocket of his pants and placed them on his study table. Quickly taking some clean clothes, he entered the bathroom as a message had popped up on his phone. Explosions and yells of anger can be heard echoing in an abandoned gym as an ash-blonde teen used his quirk to destroy yet another punching bag. With the busted gym equipment and destroyed punching bags scattered around the gym floor, you can clearly tell that the boy was pissed, really pissed. This boy is none other than 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐽𝐫𝐭, quirk, explosion. He had been coming back in this abandoned gym for 2 days straight from morning to noon and back after lunch just to release some pent-up frustration he had for the past couple of days. Who wouldn't? Just a week ago he was caught up with a fight with Deku and the nerd had successfully fought back and even broke his nose. What's worse is that the nerd had outed him with AF straight face, no stutters, no fidgeting like a scared animal. He snitched on him without hesitation, and what makes it more irritating to the blonde is that the principal looked convinced, giving Katsuki 3 weeks of suspension while Deku and his cronies 2 weeks. And making that day even worse is he got attacked by a villain that tries too hard to impersonate a shiny mook and knocking him unconscious. The heroes in the area didn't even move to save him and just looked at his waiting for a hero with a more compatible quirk. Heroes my butt. If it weren't for All Might he would have been dead. And he should be thankful for that, right? He looked weak in front of the number 1 hero, the same person he was going to surpass. And the worst part of it was, the whole thing was broadcasted in all of Japan. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 never needed any saving, he was supposed to be the strongest in his generation and is more than qualified as a candidate for UA. Call it prideful, but prideful is his middle name. But what angers him the most is when he woke up in the hospital. He woke up to see his parents looking at him with different expressions than they usually give him. His dad was looking at him with disappointment while his mom was looking at him with worry and sadness. When he tried to ask them why they are looking at him like that, his dad just scoffed at him and left the room while his mom just teared up and followed his dad. Confusion getting in his head. When he was released, his parents barely talked to him, and only when he heard them talking to each other it all made clear. It was Deku's fault. It was always his fault. The DMN nerd had not only grew a spine to fight back, but also told his mom how Katsuki bullied and hit the greenette. That DMN quirkless loser even told his mom that Katsuki deserved getting attacked by the villain. Auntie Inko then relayed this information to his parents, and here he is now. Katsuki was forbidden to use his phone, PC and gaming consoles for the remainder of the suspension PRD, and his allowance was cut off by 40%. It pissed him off. Really pissed. The thought made him even angrier, and he began obliterating another punching bag which he imagined Deku's face on it. DMNU, Deku. You useless piece of ⁡. I'll make you pay. He said as explosions echoed in the building once more. This happened while he was thinking of ways to torture the BSRD, being suspended be damned. In Dagobah Beach we see 2 clouds of smoke moving in a fast pace around the trash-filled shore as occasional ball of smoke and explosion can be heard and seen to appear to be chasing each other. These clouds of smoke are mentor and student, Delsin Rowe and Izuku Midoriya, respectively. It had been a week and 5 days since they've started training, and Izuku is showing so much improvement in such a short PRD of time. Delsin even said to himself that Izuku would surpass him easily just with his smoke and easily overpower him if the boy was able to use his electric side. Though the older Conduit told Izuku to try absorb electricity to get a grip of it, the greenette refused and just told him that he wanted to MSTR smoke first before using his electricity. Izuku even pointed out that he wanted to use his smoke to pass the exam in honor to Delsin. That and he wouldn't want to risk causing a massive blackout in all of Japan. It took the mentor and student 25 before Izuku used a smoke-enhanced uppercut on Delsin's chin. This made the older Conduit staggered backwards before getting tackled, or should I say speared him to the sand. Delsin was about to use a smoke shot to Izuku's face before a hand made its way on his face. Yield. Izuku said in a serious tone, unusual to be heard on the carefree boy. Delsin had to submit before Izuku jumped off him while giving the older man a smug grin. Welp, that's 50-47. My lead. Better luck next time, old man. He said, making Delsin gain a tick mark on his head. It had only been a week and a couple of days, and Izuku transformed from a timid, meek nerd into a smug, cocky bee like Delsin himself. Okay, 1, I'm not that old. And 2, you got lucky, brat. He snapped back in annoyance as he stood up before dusting off the sand on his jeans. He looked at the boy, who just laughed and walked towards a motorcycle that they hit in their game of smoke tag, and absorbed the smoke from it. Also, don't get too full of yourself, Izuku. You still have a long way to go. Though he said that, he knew dim and well that that wasn't luck. He was outclassed by a younger conduit, and Izuku had just been a conduit for a week and 5 days. The kid's a prodigy. He learns and takes everything Delsin shows him like a sponge. He couldn't help but wonder how strong the boy would get when he began training in UA. Putting that aside, you need stay humble, kid. I know you are enjoying your powers right now, but being cocky won't bring anything good, kid. Izuku looked at the man with a curious expression. Trust me. I know. That made Izuku nod a bit before looking at his hands as smoke covered it. It took Izuku 10 seconds of staring at his hand before looking back at the older man with a smile on his face. Don't worry, Delaware. I'll keep that in mind. Delsin grinned before ruffling his green hair in an affectionate way. Good. Now run along. You wouldn't want your mom to worry. Delsin said, which made Izuku's face fall into a sad look. This didn't go unnoticed to the older conduit. Something wrong? Izuku hesitated for a bit and took a deep breath. Not much. Just had an argument with my mom, he said blandly as he sat down the sand, eyes glued to the crashing waves. The banner man looked at the boy with a curious expression. Care to share? He asked as he sat next to the boy. The younger conduit was silent for a bit. It took him 5 minutes before he told his mentor his argument with his mom. Izuku told his mentor how he had told his mom how Bakugo had treated him after all this years, and how he punched the CRP out of the blonde's nose, how he reacted when she told him that Katsuki got attacked by a villain, and how he yelled at his mom when he told her that he wasn't friends with the bully. Delsin didn't say anything and just listened intently at the boy. He noticed the slight anger when Bakugo's name was mentioned and the hint of joy when he described how he punched the bully. Throughout Izuku's ranting, Delsin saw how sad he looked when he mentioned his mom. After Izuku finished talking, he looked at his mentor for a reaction. Delsin just looked at the ocean for a solid 10 seconds before talking. Demon, that's a lot to take in, he said as looked at the boy and smiled. Let me start with how you reacted to your bully, thinking why you had reacted to his attack was nothing but a way to release your frustrations, he said and chuckled a bit. There is nothing better than a bully getting put to his place. And by standing up for yourself will either make him stop messing with you or make him want to screw you up, and hearing how he reacted to your punch, he will be the latter. But I don't think he'll be stupid enough to do the same thing knowing the consequences, he said, reassuring the greenette that Bakugo will not attack him. Oh, how wrong he was. Though if he does attack you, well, blackmail can always be an option, he said as he chuckled darkly, making Izuku's sweat drop at the sudden 180-degree change in personality. Delsin then stopped chuckling and looked at Izuku with a serious expression. When it comes to your mom, I want to slap you in the head for shouting at her. Never, ever shout at your mother, he said sternly. This made Izuku lower his head in shame. He had really regretted yelling at his mom, and hearing his mentor scold him about it hurts him. But hearing everything that you have been through, I'll say that what you did was understandable, wrong but understandable the less. He looked at the boy. Seeing that Izuku is still looking down with an ashamed expression, made his expression soften. He places his hand on the boy's curly locks. Don't think about it too much. I'm sure your mom would forgive you. Just give her time. Trust me. I know, I also had arguments with Betty, and yet we forgive each other and grew closer, he said with a smile and a sense of longing, remembering his late friend/mother figure back in the 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐽 tribe. Izuku hesitantly looked at the older man. He was still sad, but seeing Delsin's smile made him crack a small smile. Have you told her that you're a conduit? Delsin asked as he met the boy's stare. Izuku simply shook his head and looked down. No, I haven't. I couldn't. I'm afraid that she would become even more distant. His mentor nodded and looked back to the sea. I understand. It is hard being a conduit in a world full of quirks. They'll judge and fear us just by being a conduit. It's almost as worse as being quirkless. Maybe even worse, Delsin said as he grimaced, remembering how he was treated the time he came to Japan. The heroes almost got him arrested. Almost, since they could stand up after fighting them. But she deserves to know, Izuku. It doesn't matter if you two are still in a fight. She's your mom. Whatever her reaction is, it doesn't matter. He looked back at the boy and grabbed his shoulder, earning a look from the boy. Izuku just nodded in understanding, and looked back at the ocean, Delsin mirroring his action. They stayed like that before Izuku stood up. You're right, Delaware. She deserves to know. I'll tell her when I get home, he said as he looked at the man who just gave him a smile before smirking. When was I wrong? He challenged the boy, only to be surprised when Izuku suddenly pulled out a notepad from thin air, and nerdy spectacles suddenly appear on his eyes. Well, let's see. The time you thought that you said that 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 is stronger than Alex Mercer, the time you said Joaquin Phoenix portrayed Joker the best, and oh, the time you thought Fetch liked you more than me, Izuku said with a smirk with the last comment. He met the so-called laser girl 2 days ago, and to say that she found him cute was an understatement. He had remembered seeing Delsin's face when Fetch began rubbing her cheeks on Izuku's freckled cheek was hilarious. He saw the man looking jealous and shocked. Who wouldn't when a lady with a destructive tendency began hugging a 14-year-old boy just because he looked cute? Izuku blushed remembering the affectionate action of the female conduit. She was so nice to him to even offered her powers, Neon, to him. Though he was tempted on getting another power, he kindly rejected her offer but told the Pinkette that he will think about it. He shook himself from his thoughts and looked at the man, had to stop an urge to laugh out loud when he saw Delsin's eyes twitch in irritation, remembering the time he introduced Izuku with Fetch. Whatever, smartass. Get lost and go home already, he cried in annoyance, earning a laugh from Izuku, who just waved him off. They both said their goodbyes and Izuku went home while he stayed back. Come out already, Yagi. I know you're out there, he said to no one in particular. That is when a skinny man with blonde hair showed up from behind a stack of trash. It was All Might in his skinny form. It's been a while, Rowe, All Might said, earning a deadpan look from the conduit. Cut the chase already, Yagi. What do you want? Delsin said in a serious tone. All Might or Toshinori Yagi frowned at this and just sighed. I was just wondering why you were with that boy. Oh, you mean Izuku? I'm training him for the entrance exam for 2 weeks. He paused and stood up. He was about to continue when All Might interrupted him. Why would you of all people train a middle school student to become a hero when you are not even one? All Might said, emphasizing the you and hero to prove his point. Delsin just shrugged and looked at the ocean. Because unlike you, I can see the potential of a person and not judge them nor tell them if they can be a hero just by their quirk or the lack of it. Which reminds me, he then looked at the man with a glare, making the hero flinch. You're AF hypocrite, he said in an angry tone. You tell the boy that he can't be a hero if he doesn't have a quirk, when you don't even have one in the first place. He glared at Yagi harder, making said man look away in shame. And because of that you just lost the best candidate for one for all. That made All Might look at the man in a confused yet shocked look. He was shocked that he knew his quirk that was given to him by his 𝐶𝐻. What do you mean? He asked cautiously at the bannerman. He didn't get why he just lost the best candidate when he knew that Mirio Togata was the best candidate for one for all. Well, at least that's what Night Eye said. Delsin looked at him and raised his hand with his index finger raised up. One is that he learns quickly and has a giant brain under that patch of curly hair. He then raised his middle finger to make a peace sign. 2. His quirkless, and if I'm not mistaken, the perfect successor is an empty vessel to prevent it from overflowing. OFA is a stockpiling quirk that got through 7 different users minus your dumbass, of course. And giving it to a person with a quirk is basically murdering the successor. All Might heard this and widened his eyes. Not by surprise but by fear. How does he know all of this? Seemingly reading his mind, Delsin answered. Gran Torino told me. That made the blonde hero flinched and frown at the name. Why would his former teacher/mentor tell Rowe that confidential information? He then raised his ring finger, making a 3. Third and lastly, he smirked and continued, no conduit can have a quirk, he said, dropping the news to the blonde buffoon. All Might being shocked was an understatement. The kid he saved from the sludge villain a week ago was a conduit. Why didn't he use his powers to escape the villain? Well, as much as I still want to talk to you, which I don't by the way, he said, turning his face away from the man as he turned to the stairs. I need to go now. I still have to do something important. When he said important, he meant go get a large burger with fries. So, 𝐻𝗔𝐿, he said as he used smoke dash to leave the still shell-shocked hero to his own devices. Did he really lose a perfect successor? He looked at the sky and wondered. Nana, what do you think? 2 days later, in a orange skied afternoon, we see Izuku sitting down on the beach side, watching the ocean as the sounds of waves and birds can be heard in the background. Today was the last day that he will be training with Delsin, but the man didn't came. Izuku had wondered why the man didn't came, but it struck him. He was going to leave tomorrow morning and had to pack for his flight back to America. Izuku understood this and just stayed in the beach for the rest of the day. He didn't really mind since by tomorrow he would go back to school. His suspension was over anyway. After today, his life will be back to how it had always been. The only difference is he is more confident and has a bigger chance to pass the entrance exam. He was completely lost in thought when a voice called from behind him. Hey, Izuku. The voice said, which made Izuku snap out of it and quickly looked behind him. There he saw Delsin walking towards him, a bag on his left shoulder. Izuku stood up and smiled at the man. Delsin smiled back, and when he was a couple of meters away from Izuku, he took of the bag and threw it to Izuku. The bag landed on Izuku's arms, albeit barely. Izuku looked at it for a while before looking back at the man with a confused look. Delsin just laughed and placed his hands on the pockets of his vest. Look inside, he said, gesturing at the bag. Izuku just looked at him with a raised eyebrow. He then looked at the bag and slowly opened it. When he does, his eyes widen and looked at the man in front of him with a shocked expression. Delsin just nodded and Izuku took out what is in the bag. He pulled out the object that was supposed to be in the bag. Now in his hands, Izuku held out a dark forest green zip-up hoodie, a black denim vest with red and blue pattern in each front side, and what appears to be a silver-colored mouthguard, his Canon mouthguard. Izuku inspected the items and looked at the man in front of him. /N. The clothes here are in the cover of the story. Are these? He asked the man without looking up. Delsin just grinned at the boy and said, Yeah, that's my gift for you. It's kinda big, but you'll still grow, and you won't be using that until you entered UA anyway. You like it? Izuku just looked up and gave him a big smile. Are you kidding? This is the best gift I got in my whole life. His eyes then landed on the mouthguard. But what's with the mouthguard? He asked as he looked at the man once more. He saw him smirk and instantly grew a headache. That's a noise-canceling mouthguard, blocks every sound that you and your muttering, sputtering mouth releases. Delsin laughed while Izuku just gave him a deadpan look that says, Are you serious? I don't mutter anymore. Izuku grumbled as he looked at the mouthguard, as a smile began to crawl on his face. Thank you, he said, looking up. Thank you for everything, Delaware. He bowed to the still laughing man. He was really grateful that he met the man and trained under him even in just a short time. Delsin looked at the boy after he stopped laughing, slightly taken aback on the boy's show of gratitude. Sure, Izuku would thank him for the daily training or the compliments that he often gave the boy. Seeing the boy thank him through such a respectful way makes him very happy. After waving off the thank yous that the boy had gave him and waited for the boy to straight up before looking at the boy with a small grin. Stand up, Izuku. You're embarrassing me, he said, sheepishly waving his hands as a blush was dusting his face. They both laughed at this. They began to talk to each other about what had they been doing the whole day. Well, Delsin was, since Izuku was only waiting for the man in the beach. Delsin told him that he was busy on the paperwork that is needed for his departure tomorrow morning. They talked for what seems to be an hour when they noticed that the sun was almost setting. At that moment, they decided to go home. As they were about to part ways, Delsin had stopped Izuku. Confusion seemingly visible in the greenette's face. The older didn't say a word but just looked at the boy before raising his right arm and removing his chain. He held it on his hand first before looking at the boy and smiling. The day I met you, I knew to myself that you will surpass me, not only in using smoke but as a conduit. In my whole life, I never someone who had suffered so much yet can still show a genuine smile and care for those around them. He paused as he held the chains with stronger grip. He looked at Izuku, who was just staring at him. I made a lot of mistakes in my time as a vigilante or freedom fighter, and had made too many. I want you to promise me that whatever happens, be careful in the decisions that you will make in the future. Because trust me, A boomerang returns back to the person that throws it, he said, earning a nod from the boy. Delsin smiled at this and took Izuku's hand and handed him the chain. I used this chain to save and help those who are in need and almost killed a couple of lives with it. He paused before looking Izuku in the eye. Promise me that you will use this chain to help, heal and not destroy, he said as he looked Izuku dead in the eye. He was taken aback at the same intensity that Izuku sent to him. Delsin smirked inwardly at the boy's stare. I promise to save and help those who are in need. You have my word, Bannerman, Izuku said as he clutched the chain in his hand before wrapping it on his right wrist. For some reason, it felt he looked at it and smiled. They began walking until they stopped in an intersection. They said their goodbyes and Izuku looked at the man who began walking to the opposite side of the intersection. So this is where we part ways. He kept on looking at the man's retreating form as he felt a pit in his stomach. Not even noticing it, he was tearing up. He had grew fond of the older Conduit and thought of him as the older brother and friend that he never had. Izuku looked at the chain that Delsin had gave him and clenched his fist. Delsin! He yelled at the man. Seeing the man turn toward him, Izuku used smoke dash to get closer to the older Conduit and did the most logical thing he had thought at the moment. He hugged the man. Shocked at the display that the boy is showing him, he melted in the hug and began patting the boy's back. Delsin wouldn't say it out loud, but he knew that he loved the kid like a little brother that he never had. I'm gonna miss this kid. It took them a couple of minutes before they broke up the hug. Izuku was wiping a tear from his eyes and smiled at the man. You're gonna come back to Japan, right? He asked the man who gave him a ruffle on the hair and grinned at the boy. Of course, he said before he looked at the boy and reached out for his fist for a fist bump. Pass the entrance exam and be the hero you always wanted to be. I'll be rooting for you. Izuku smiled at the man before fist bumping with the older Conduit. I will, I promise. With one last hug, they turned away from each other and the duo went on their separate ways. Unknown to Izuku, Delsin looked back at him and gave him one last smile. Good luck, Izuku, he whispered before smoke dashing away. Izuku had just arrived home. He has a large grin in his face and he kept fidgeting with the chain on his wrist. He even looked at the bag where his new and future hero costume is placed. Saying he was happy is an understatement. He had never felt so blessed all his life. And it's all thanks to Delsin Rowe. He would do his best to pass the entrance exam in 9 months in order to not only be a hero but be the first Conduit to become a hero. As he entered the house, he heard that there was a noise coming from the kitchen. Hearing something sizzling and stirring, he immediately thought that his mom was cooking. Izuku remembered the talk he had with Delsin, and even after that he didn't talk to his mom the time he got home like he promised. He thought that he still need to gather some courage to talk to his mom. But remembering the look of sadness he had caused his mom, he couldn't help but feel angry at himself. He needs to talk to her. He needs to apologize to her. And he needs to tell her that he's a Conduit. Breathing in and out, Izuku made up his mind. He walked to the kitchen and saw his mom was cooking something on the stove. He noticed that she was saying, or should I say muttering something. He sweat dropped at his mom's muttering spree. It's genetic, I guess. He walked slowly toward her and hugged her from behind. He had to suppress a laugh when she violently flinched and eeped in surprise. She looked up and saw Izuku looking at her with a small smile. She went back to cooking. He frowned a little but didn't show it. I'm sorry for yelling at you, Mom, he said in a whisper, hugging his mother tighter. I know I was upset that day, but it wasn't right for me to vent my anger and frustration at you. His mom didn't respond and just continued stirring. Izuku took this as a sign to continue. I'm sorry for being secretive to you, but I only did all that because I know that you have so many problems in your mind. And I don't want you to worry about me. You've done so much for that I can't even thank you well enough. I'm lucky to have you as a mom. He felt tears began to form in his green eyes but refused to let it fall. I want to make it up to you, spend more time with you and be a better son. I want to tell you everything I've been up to for the past 2 weeks, and I want to tell you something, he said. Seeing no visible reaction, he looked down. I see, he thought sadly. He was on the verge of crying and only his willpower was keeping his tears from falling. but I know that you're still not ready to talk to me. I'll go rest on my room now. Thank you for listening. Good night. He planted a kiss on her head. I love you, he whispered and released her from his hug. He took a step back and turned away. The moment he closed the door of his room and lied on his bed, he broke down in tears. He felt so ashamed and sad at the same time. He's always got the cold shoulder from his peers and teachers, but it coming from his mom felt so painful. Delsin's words came back to him. A boomerang returns back to the person that throws it. He understood it clearly and is feeling the karma of his emotional outburst last time they talked. Izuku didn't mind it. He deserves this pain, this feeling of loneliness, this feeling of emptiness, and he knew it. He sobbed himself to sleep with one thought in his mind. At least I tried. In the other side of the house, we can hear muffled sobs coming from the kitchen as Izuku Midoriya cried as she felt the pain in the voice of her son's voice. She wanted to respond to what Izuku had said, as he wanted to apologize to him for being distant and being a bad mother. But after Izuku told her that he kept his pain to himself because he doesn't want to worry, she couldn't help but felt sad and can't find the right words to say. Inko felt the pain when Izuku kissed her on the top of the head and almost cried when he said, I love you, to her. The moment he closed the door of his room, Inko collapsed and covered her mouth to silence out the sobs that tried to escape her throat. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry, and that is the reason why laws against public quirk use is made. That's all for today. Class dismissed. With that said, the teacher left the classroom as the students began putting away their notebooks, books, and writing utensils into their bags. Some even exited the room to go home or hang out. Izuku just finished writing what was in the board, immediately stood up and began putting away his stuff. And as he was doing that, a scent of burnt banana entered his nostrils and he groaned inwardly. He looked to his front and saw a certain blonde. It had been 5 months since their fight and Bakugo's suspension ended. When the blonde came back, he tried to get back at Izuku for breaking his nose and for snitching about Katsuki's sour behavior. Even blamed Izuku for his allowance getting cut and consoles confiscated. Katsuki would have blasted Izuku using his quirk if he hadn't been stopped by their homeroom teacher and was warned to withdraw his UA application and be blacklisted from any hero school. This caused shock and anger from Izuku and Katsuki, respectively. Izuku was shocked that not only his teacher told Katsuki to stop but also made the blonde think of his chances at UA before laying a finger on Izuku. He looked at the teacher and was surprised to see a genuine smile given to him and a look of care that he had been looking for all these years. It made his tear up a bit and smiled back. Katsuki was angry. That's an understatement. He was livid. Who wouldn't? Just 3 weeks before his suspension, every single teacher in their goddamn school wouldn't bat an eye on the useless piece of SHT, Deku. But now, just because he got a hit on him, they act like Deku is some kind of god or something. It enraged the blonde and his lackeys didn't even do anything to make Deku's life hell while he was in suspension. Like, why the hell didn't they put Deku on his place? Useless. Izuku just shrugged as he collected his stuff and completely ignored the blonde. But Katsuki has a different thing in mind. He began to walk towards Izuku, with his lackey lagging not far behind him but far enough to not end up in the crossfire once again. They knew how Katsuki's explosion felt and they wouldn't want to get hit by it ever again. And they wouldn't want to get punched in the face by Izuku like how he punched Katsuki last time. Where do you think you're going, Deku? He asked in his usual menacing tone that used to scare Izuku. The greenette just ignored him and kept putting away his stuff into his bag, as if he didn't heard the blonde talk. This annoyed the blonde and growled, "Are you ignoring me?" Izuku thought, without stopping what he was doing. His lack of response further infuriated the blonde and gritted his teeth. As Izuku was about to take the last notebook, Katsuki slammed his hand on top of the table, making Izuku pause. Everyone who were still in the classroom jumped at the loud sound. He would have flinched like the others if it was still 5 months ago. But experiencing that for 10 freaking years made him immune of Katsuki's special greetings. Bakugo saw this and wasn't happy about the reaction. He had expected Deku to flinch like the coward he is, but instead just paused and didn't even look fazed by his loud slam. As he was about to snap at the quirk genius, Izuku's head rose. The brunette looked at the blonde with a blank expression, an expression that made the explosive blonde angrier. "What do you want, Katsuki?" he said in a bored tone. "I asked you a question, Deku." Bakugo growled out. "And stop calling me Katsuki." "Oh, if I was ignoring you." "Yeah, obviously," Izuku said nonchalantly and snatched the notebook on the table and putting it inside his bag. "And to where I was going, where do you think?" "In 5 months, yeah, but now, home." "Are you talking back to me?" Bakugo yelled out in annoyance, not liking how Izuku is talking back to him. Izuku, however, raised an eyebrow. "That's how a conversation works," he said blankly, making the blonde growl even more and some of the people in the room stifle a giggle. Even Katsuki's lackeys were suppressing a laugh. After closing the bag, he slung it on his shoulders and began walking to the door. It took him 2 steps before his shoulder was gripped by an explosion-enhanced grip. "You think you're funny, Deku?" He just stopped walking and looked at his shoulder, before looking at the blonde with narrowed eyes. "Let go of me, Katsuki," he said in a low voice. Though he was unnerved by the brunette's tone, he continued, "Or what, Deku?" he said in a challenging tone, smirk showing. "I will make the broken nose I gave you look like a pimple," the brunette said, still in the same tone, but with narrowed eyes. It didn't hurt since he was a conduit, but his uniform just got ironed this morning and this sweaty but mother trucker is ruining it. Everyone in the room felt a shiver in their spines when they heard Izuku's tone of voice. Some of the girls there can be seen to have a tint of pink on their cheeks, hearing how hot Izuku sounded. Katsuki didn't budge and was about to mock Izuku, when all of a sudden he slammed on the classroom floor. Izuku just performed a perfect judo throw on the blonde. A sickening thud can be heard as Katsuki groaned in pain. The onlookers were shocked at this. Even the lackeys were stunned and winced on how Izuku, the quirkless kid, just threw Katsuki, the best student, to the ground with ease and mastery. They stared at the grunting Bakugo before laying their eyes on Izuku, who was fixing his charred uniform as if he hadn't did the throw. Izuku began walking towards the door, passing by Katsuki's lackeys who were looking at him with awe and fear. He walked towards the door and the crowd began to make a path for him, as if he was royalty or something. Before walking out of the door, he paused and looked back at Katsuki, who was beginning to stand up, painfully. The brunette smirked at the grunting blonde and looked around. So, some of his classmates looking at him with fear, awe and wait. Is that a blush? He blinked when he saw some of his female classmates have blushes covering their faces and slowly turned then walk away. "Oh boy. Don't tell me, I'm starting to get fangirls," he said as he sprinted out of the room, not hearing the sudden yell and explosion that echoed in the classroom. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park? "It's been a while since the last time I've been here," said a nostalgic 𝐶𝐮𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐻𝐸. All Might is walking towards the stairs of the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park in a brisk pace. He was looking longingly at the ocean, completely ignoring the junk that is blocking the beach's stunning smooth, white sand. Though looking like a junkyard, Toshinori can't stop but smile at the sight of the once breathtaking ocean as he remembered his days when he was still training with his 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸𝐸. This was the same place where he got his quirk from her, and this place will be the same place where he will pass it down. He came here to meet up with his former sidekick, Sir Night-Eye, and pass on one for all to his protégé, Mirio Togata, also known as Lemillion, a young man with the same physique as and goal as Toshinori. To save people. Though the young teen's goal was to save 1 million people, it's the same thing. As he walked down the stairs of the beach park and saw his former sidekick talking to a young man with a very muscular build and blonde hair arranged in a cowlick. Observing the young man, he immediately guessed that this is Mirio Togata. Looking at the younger blonde, he smiled inwardly. Mirai was right. He does look like a perfect candidate for WhatIf, and because of that you just lost the best candidate for One for All. All Might paused on his thoughts when he remembered what his former opponent said to him months ago. It plagued his mind and made him overthink his decision-making in his next successor. He may not like Delsin Rowe, mainly because the guy humiliated him and Endeavor in front of the top 5 heroes at that time, but he can't argue that the man has a point. The moment he saw Midoriya, he saw a shadow of his old self in the young boy, determination, purity and a crave of heroism. He rejected the idea of being a quirkless, on the reason of the line of heroics is too dangerous for those who had no power. The boy would be lucky if he passed the entrance exam, though he highly doubt it. However, seeing that the boy was a conduit, it will be possible for him to enter the hero course. Though because of the fate of conduits, he would be lucky if he lasted in class for a week. I wanna be a hero. Pokemon, advanced. Izuku sang to himself as he walked towards the direction of the Dagoba beach to train. After leaving the campus, Izuku changed into his usual training attire. A fat gum hoodie that he bought after selling all his All Might merch over a plain white t-shirt and gym shorts with his usual red shoes. He planned to go straight to Dagoba Beach. It had been 3 months since he visited that place to train. He hadn't been there since a month and 2 weeks after his suspension. He was too focused on his studies. He would always go to the junkyard, Air Beach to train his conduit powers. Practicing his abilities, his use of the chain that Delsin gave him and experiment on making new moves and combinations incorporated with his chain. Because of the training, he had mastered most of the abilities that Delsin chose. His smoke thrusters, smoke dash and other mobility moves are perfect. He can perform all of it with ease and without slowing down. His smoke shot and cinder blast are decent but well practiced, so is his sulfur bomb. His cinder missile and orbital drop may need a little bit of practice, but since both moves are widespread attacks and can attract too much attention, so attempting to practice it was a no-go. Though his cinder missile are more practiced than the orbital drop. He has yet to discover how to use or activate his electrokinetic powers. Since he can't find any source of electricity that he can use without risking a massive power shortage in the whole of Japan. A generator or a transformer would be helpful, but those things are too expensive and dangerous, respectively. He'll just train his electrokinesis in UA when he passes the entrance exams. And pass he will. As he turned a corner, Izuku had to stop on his tracks when he heard a loud crash in an alleyway. The alleyway was the same alleyway where Akira dragged him and met and got saved by Delsin. He shivered when he remembered how defenseless he had been that day. Shrugging the memory of, he looked at the dark alleyway with narrowed eyes. Trying to look in the dark, narrow alley. Izuku then had his eyes widen when he saw 3 shadows in the alleyway. And by the looks of it, someone was in trouble. Not really thinking straight, he slowly walked in the alleyway as quietly as he can to not grab attention. As he approached the figures, he saw 2 thugs and a girl with raven hair. Looking closely at the girl, Izuku can see that she is shaking in fear and has scratches on her face. He had to look away when he saw the front of her school uniform slightly was ripped open, revealing an average bust being held by a black sports bra. The girl was backing away from the thugs while whimpering. Izuku then looked back at the thugs and saw that they were grinning and cackling like madmen. He recognized the thugs from the news on TV. Those 2 were the wanted criminals, guilty of theft, vandalism and some cases of RP. He knew that look of madness and lust coming from the thugs and it angered him. They were planning on molesting the girl. Enraged, Izuku unconsciously activated his smoke and began sprinting towards the thugs. Not noticing the cloud of smoke racing towards them, one of the thugs stepped forward, the whimpering Ravenet. He was about to take another step when a smoking fist landed on his face and sent him flying towards a trash bin with a loud crash, knocking the man unconscious. The other thug was in a mix of shock and surprised when his partner was sent flying. He quickly looked to Izuku's direction and growled, "You son of a bitch! You'll pay for that." His fingernails began growing in length and he lunged forward to Izuku. The thug had his claws in a slashing form, only goal is to cut the boy in 2. "Watch out!" The girl screamed at Izuku's direction as the man came only a feet away from him, only to see Izuku getting covered in smoke and the claw pass through him. The girl and the thug blinked in confusion when Izuku disappeared from the man's view and appeared behind him. Izuku then did a move that he saw in Delsin's memory. He covered his hands with smoke and grabbed the man on the head and slammed him to the ground. When the man was on the ground, he pushed smoke into the man's face, knocking the man unconscious. After that, Izuku grabbed the man by his leg and dragged him towards his buddy. When he placed them back to back, he then took out a roll of flex tape he had in his bag and tied the 2 criminals. Why he had flex tape in his bag? We'll never know. Grunting in satisfaction of his work, Izuku stood up and turned to the girl, who was looking at him with awe and shock. He then walked towards her and stopped in front of the ravenet. The young Conduit then unzipped his jacket, making the girl flinch a bit. She then flinched once again when the jacket was placed on top of her. Wouldn't want you to get cold, right? He asked. Looking up, she saw Izuku reached a hand towards her. The girl looked at his hand and back at him, before grabbing hold of his outstretched hand. Izuku then held it tight as he pulled her up. The girl almost fell if it weren't for Izuku's hand. Are you okay? He asked the girl. She just looked at him and nodded timidly. Thank you, she said in a soft voice. A small blush covered her cheeks when she saw his freckles. Happy to help, he said with a smile. Izuku then looked at the girl and analyzed her face. Now that he looked closely at the girl, he noticed that she has red pupils and a small scar on her right eyelid. He had to stop a blush from forming on his cheeks when he looked at down her lips and saw that she had sharp teeth. Shaking off his thoughts, Izuku let go of her hand and looked at the still unconscious thugs, then back to the girl. Can you call the police to take them? He asked her in a soft tone. Receiving a nod, he sighed in relief. He then took his bag off the ground and slung it on his sleeves. Standing up and looking at the girl who was still looking at him. I'll be leaving now, take care, he said as he began walking away. Hey, wait. The girls called out from behind. Izuku stopped and looked back at her. He asked, tilting his head. Izuku saw her blush a bit, making him raise an eyebrow. Is she sick or something? What's your name? She asked in a timid voice. Looking down a bit. Izuku thought about it for a sec, then shrugged. No harm in telling her my name, right? Izuku. My name's Izuku Midoriya. How about you? 𝐮𝐻𝐸 Kirishima, she said while clutching the fat gum hoodie Izuku lent her. Thank you for saving me, she said, bowing repeatedly at the boy. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at the girl's actions. He found it weird in a good way that a girl is bowing to him. You're welcome, Kiri-chan. Just be careful though, he said, earning a nod from the girl. He nodded to her. Before walking away, Izuku continued. Wouldn't want an appealing girl like you to get hurt, he said, winked before dashing away in a cloud of smoke, leaving a blushing 𝐮𝐸. 𝐮𝐸 stared at the spot where Izuku was and smiled. Izuku Midoriya. What a manly name, she though, as she clutched the hoodie covering her damaged uniform. I hope I see you again. She then fished out her phone from her bag and quickly called the police. After the police had taken the criminals and asking for the details about what happened, not mentioning Izuku, she began walking home. On her way home, she entered a convenience store and bought hair dye. She was supposed to come here earlier before those thugs dragged her in the alleyway. They asked for her belongings and threatened her that they will do something to her. Then ripping off her uniform to make a point. Because of fear and shock, she collapsed and froze up. If it weren't for Izuku, she wouldn't know what would have happened to her. Izuku Midoriya. Ah yes, her savior. Her hero. Her knight in shining armor. 𝐮𝐸 felt safe when she saw and held on his hand. The way he easily manhandled the thugs was so manly. The way he placed the hoodie on her was so manly. The way he looked at her was so manly. The way he complimented her was so manly. The way Izuku Midoriya radiated heroic vibes as he moved to save her was so manly. Blushing hard, she shook off her thoughts and went to the cosmetics section. Taking the red dye to pay for it, she began to wonder. Would he like it if I dyed my hair red? It took Izuku 20 minutes to get back to their apartment complex. He was supposed to go to Dagoba Beach when he decided not to. His encounter with the thugs while saving a girl were enough of a training for him for now. He felt good saving someone who needs help, but had to leave immediately before any police or hero arrived at the location. He wouldn't risk his chances in entering UA by getting caught doing vigilante work, especially since he is a conduit. As he smoke-dashed his way home, he saw a truck not far from him driving past him with an uncontrollable speed. And a couple of meters in front of the truck was a woman passing the streets. Judging by the speed of the truck, it won't be long before it hit the woman. And since the woman was carrying grocery bags, knowing that the truck was going to hit the woman, Izuku began to smoke dash towards the woman. With a burst of speed he was trying to outrun the truck. But it proved as a terribly hard task as the vehicle was too fast. This didn't stop Izuku as he pushed his limits and dashed faster. In a moment he was lagging behind the truck, next he was meters away from the vehicle and was now close to the woman. Without warning, Izuku scooped the woman in a bridle's carry and smoke dashed to the other side of the pedestrian lane. To his luck and relief, they were only seconds before the truck sped past them with a loud honk but not even stopping. Izuku was panting when he stopped. That was quite an effort for him. Good thing he began training his legs in running. And good thing he was fast enough to get to the woman. Speaking of the woman, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Izuku didn't get to continue as he blanched at when he recognized who the woman he had just saved. Sweating and shaking, Izuku looked at the woman still in his arms. "Oh no. In the quiet apartment of the Midoriya residence, a small click can be heard indicating that the door had just closed. Also means that Izuku just left the house for school. In the kitchen of the small apartment, 𝐮𝐻 Midoriya is aimlessly washing her dishes. A sad expression was visible on the short woman's face. She turned her head at the covered food on the dining table and frowned. Izuku had skipped breakfast again. She let out a small sigh as she went back into drying the washed dishes. It had been 3 days ever since 𝐮𝐻 was saved by her son as she was about to get hit by a speeding truck. At that day, she saw her quirkless son use some kind of smoke-related powers to keep her from getting hit by the truck. She was shocked and surprised. Somehow, Izuku had unlocked his quirk and had used it to save her from meeting her end. After almost 10 years of being diagnosed as quirkless, he unlocked his quirk. She automatically thought that he will be happy to tell her this, but no. That day when he saw her face and realized who he had saved, only one thing was seen in his eyes. It wasn't shock nor surprise. It was what she least expected to see in her son's eyes. 𝐮𝐻 saw how scared Izuku was when he saw her face. The visible paling of his face. The trembling of his body. The fast and heavy breaths he produced as if having a panic attack. The way Izuku deliberately ran away after setting her down on the sidewalk. It confused her. She expected Izuku to stutter and mutter a 2-page-long explanation of getting caught using his quirk and the quirk itself. But no, he just ran and ran without looking back. Ever since that day, Izuku made his best effort to avoid 𝐮𝐻. And if ever they encounter each other, he would find a reason to get away from her. The thing that confused 𝐮𝐻 is why. Why would Izuku be so scared at being seen using the smoke powers? Was his powers considered villainous? And most importantly, why was he so scared that his own mom saw it? Finishing up, 𝐮𝐻 went to the living room for rest. It was her day off from one of her jobs and she was supposed to use this day off to clear out her mind from the stress that had happened for the past 3 days. 𝐮𝐻 began recalling everything that had happened in the past 5 months. The time Izuku came home late, he informed her that his friend, Katsuki, was bullying him for 10 years and he had enough and fought back, breaking said boy's nose. After that, her son got suspended for 2 weeks and had somehow got attacked by villain twice at the same day, but somehow survived unscathed. While Katsuki was attacked by one villain and got hospitalized. Then, Izuku yelled at her when she wanted him to go with her visit the blonde bully. Her son tried to apologize to her but she didn't talk to him. After 5 months during their last conversation, she discovered his son having a quirk but he is scared when she saw it. And that's why we are here. She thought about it all for a while before she began trembling in shame. She had just ignored her son's humble apology and his way of admitting that it was wrong for him to yell at her. And what's worse is that she completely avoided him for 5 months, like she didn't even acknowledge his words. 𝐮𝐻 sighed as she placed her face on her hands to suppress a groan. What a mother I am. She stood up from the couch and made her way to her room for a nap when she suddenly saw Izuku's room was slightly open. She was about to walk away from the slightly open door but when she noticed something odd. Peering inside, her eyes widened with the design of the room. Well, the lack of it. She slowly opened the room and saw that Izuku's All Might-themed room was now a shell of its old self. All of the All Might poster, action figures, Carpets etc. gone, everything that he collected and paid for the last 10 years, all gone. Now in his room is a plain dark gray wallpaper, covered with art and posters of musicians and other heroes such as 𝐻𝗏𝐻𝐿, 𝐻𝐿, Best Jeanist and other more. So much had changed for the past 5 months, and only today that 𝐮𝐭 is seeing it all. She frowned as she walked towards the desk near the bed and inspected the contents. There she saw some of his hero journals and picture frames that 𝐮𝐭 didn't remember was there the last time she entered the room. Taking the first picture frame, she held it up. 𝐮𝐭's eyes started tearing when she saw the first picture. The picture of a younger Izuku in an 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸 being, held up by her. Both of them were smiling widely as Izuku's arm was in the air, assuming a hero pose. 𝐴/N, the picture at the top. 𝐮𝐭 had to keep a tear from streaming down her cheeks as she hugged the picture closely to her. Emotional as she remembered how happy and excited Izuku had been when they were playing heroes. Help! 𝐮𝐭 cried out while being covered by a white blanket. A smile covered her face when she heard small footsteps coming from outside the door. The door slammed open, and there came Izuku in his favorite all-might onesie. Arms raised and smile wide as he yelled out, "I am here." He ran forward as he hugged 𝐮𝐭 from behind. 𝐮𝐭 giggled and faced her son, hugging him back. "Thank you, my hero." Their smiles and laughter can be heard echoing in the small room of the apartment as the memory faded. 𝐮𝐭 calmed down from crying as she wiped her eyes and nose with a handkerchief she had in her skirt. She let a small smile on her face as she placed the picture frame back down the desk. She looked at it for a second before looking on the other picture frame. The picture consists of 2 people on the stairs of the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The first one was Izuku, who was holding on the camera. His face was a little sweaty and looked like he had spent all day working out. It might be the case if the swollen muscles on his arm is an indication. 𝐮𝐭 then looked at the second person who was a little bit at the back in the photo. He was a man in his 30s. He was wearing a red flannel shirt under a white hoodie jacket. Over the jacket was a denim jacket and he is wearing jeans and black Converse shoes. Most noticeable from the man's appearance is a chain wrapped his right wrist and a red beanie on top his head. In the picture, the two were grinning widely while gesturing a peace sign. 𝐮𝐭 didn't know the man, but as she looked at the man in scrutiny, the man began to look familiar. As time passed by, she was about to give up on recognizing the man when she saw a note at the back of the picture. Looking at it, she quickly recognized Izuku's hasty yet readable handwriting. "Me and Delsin." Her eyes widened when she read the name of the man next to her son in the picture. Delsin Rowe, aka as the Bannerman. A conduit that was rumored to use 4 different conduit powers. The man who had been responsible that Seattle had been saved from a person called Augustine and the Department of Unified Protection, or the DUP. And even rumored to have faced All Might and had said to have beaten the symbol of peace. She began wondering why the man was with her son. Izuku never had anything similar to the Bannerman. Well, there is one that appears to be the only similarity from Izuku and the man. That would be his smoke quirk, Izuku's smoke quirk. No wait. The smoke. 𝐮𝐭 didn't really know if Izuku's smoke powers is a quirk. Her son never confirmed it. His smoke powers similarity with Delsin's, and the way he reacted when she saw the powers. 𝐮𝐭 widened her eyes when she had put 2 on 2 together. Izuku, her son, is a conduit, or others would call them bioterrorists. No wonder why he had freaked out when she saw him use the smoke powers. The fear he had in his eyes at that time was fear of being pushed away. Fear of being rejected. Fear of being isolated. It was no secret that conduits, quirk users and quirkless people live in one environment. But after what had happened in 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐸 14 years ago and in Seattle 7 years ago, the world had been skeptical to be around conduits and treat them worse than quirkless people. In terms of acceptability, quirkless people are more accepted than conduits. Though both are isolated and looked down upon, conduits get the shorter end of the stick. She began to tremble as another tear began to form in her eyes. 𝐮𝐭 harshly wiped her tears and looked at the first picture with a determined expression. Her son had been suffering from far too long, and she is going to change that. With Izuku, that'll put the ash blonde BSTRD on the edge. Izuku thought as he did a thief vault over a trash can. He is on his way home and was doing small parkour moves on the small obstacles on the streets and alleyways. He had just made 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿 back off in the best way possible. Blackmail. Not heroic, but successful. Flashback: Izuku had just placed the last notebook into his bag and was about to leave the classroom. On his way to the door when his path was blocked by 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿. Oh boy, here we go. Izuku groaned internally as he looked up at the blonde who had been looking at him with a sinister smirk in his face. Where do you think you're going, huh, you shitty nerd? How original. What do you want, Katsuki? Izuku said in a bland tone. He was getting tired of this encounter. Hell, this had been the 5th time this week and it's only Tuesday. The smirk in the blonde's face turned into a scowl for a solid 3 seconds before going back to a smirk. A smirk which Izuku didn't like one bit. He was about to leave when Katsuki began talking again. So, you're still applying to UA? He asked Izuku in a somewhat amused voice. Izuku had to stop his eyes from narrowing. The way the blonde was talking is really unsettling for his taste. Izuku then looked at the blonde's side and saw that his lackeys were not standing by him. He looked around the classroom and saw them standing near the door with a nervous expression. They were clearly not in what Katsuki was planning. And whatever his plan was, it wasn't good. Well, everything that 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿 planned against him was never good. Yeah, what about it? Izuku said in a bored tone, but was mentally preparing himself. How are you going to pass the exams without a quirk? The question sounded more of an insult than a question. Izuku, however, just shrugged it off. I'll think of something. He said nonchalantly. Like using my conduit powers. Katsuki scoffed before looking at him directly at the eye. If you want to get a quirk, I know a way. This made Izuku raised one of his eyebrows. Not that he was interested, he was just curious where all of this will go. So as if taking the blonde's bait, he responded. Really? What is it? Katsuki only grinned like a maniac before saying the words. If you want a quirk, you can go swan dive off a rooftop and pray you'll get a quirk in your next life. He said with a laugh at the end as he turned away from Izuku. His plan was to make Izuku feel depressed for being powerless. Making the greenette feel useless and worthless so that the shitty nerd would crumble for being quirkless. He was so sure that the nerd would think twice before _ing to UA and ruin his glory. If you want a quirk, you can go swan dive off a rooftop and pray you'll get a quirk in your next life. 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿 was stopped on his tracks, wide-eyed as looked back at the green-haired boy. He saw Izuku looking at his phone as a curious expression. Before pressing it. If you want a quirk, you can go swan dive off a rooftop and pray you'll get a quirk in your next life. Izuku hummed, then looked at the blonde who was shocked and lost most of the colors on his face. Suicide baiting. Really, Katsuki? And you wanted to be a hero? Well, if UA found out about this, you'd be blacklisted. Izuku said as he saw the paling face of Katsuki turn into rage. Don't you dare I'll. He was cut off when another recording was played, only this time, from behind. He looked at the direction and saw another of his classmates holding his own phone. When he was about to approach the boy who also got a recording of him, another recording played, this time from Izuku's back. Another recording played when Katsuki turned to glare at the person. He froze to see one of his lackeys holding his phone up. A serious expression etched on his face. I think this is the time for you grow up, Katsuki. Izuku said, making the blonde look back at him. And wake up to reality. Izuku walked past Katsuki, who continued glaring at him. That the world doesn't revolve around you. Watch your actions, Katsuki. Because it's only a matter of time before every single one in this classroom gets tired of your bullshit and used that recording against you. I'll see you tomorrow. Izuku said as he walked past 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿's lackey, nodding to them and exiting the room. After Izuku left, one by one, the other students left as they looked at the still shell-shocked blonde. His lackeys were the last to leave, not looking back at him. As the class emptied and 𝐻𝐿𝐵𝐿 was left alone, he snarled and released a loud explosion that was heard throughout the whole campus. End of flashback. That'll teach him some humility. He thought as he vaulted over a crate in a random alleyway. Izuku is beginning to love doing parkour. It was a great exercise and experience for him. He'd have to thank Delsin for teaching him how to do parkour. After taking a few steps, Izuku was now in front of their apartment building and had to suppress a wince when he remembered the day he saved his mom. He saw how surprised his mom was when she recognized him and was shocked when she noticed Izuku using his smoke powers. Ever since that time, Izuku made it his best effort to avoid his mom. Though it hurt her, he just couldn't see her at the moment. The fear of being rejected and getting shunned by his own mom was plaguing his mind. His logical mind shut down when he saw his mom that time and used the anxiety side of his mind. Emotions got the best of him, and he is paying for it. The struggle to look at his mom is the clear evidence. He sighed as he entered the elevator and pressed the floor of their apartment floor. Stopping on the right floor, Izuku exited the elevator and made his way towards their apartment. As he was in front of the door, he grabbed the doorknob and pushed the door open. The moment he opened the door, he was suddenly pulled by an invisible force. Said force forcefully pulled Izuku into the apartment. In confusion and slight fear, Izuku looked up and saw his mom with her hands held up. Izuku tried his best to struggle against the hold only to be squeezed tightly, making him release a groan of displeasure. "Izuku, we need to talk," 𝐻𝐮𝐻𝐽 said in a shaky voice, seemingly struggling to keep her son in place. Hearing the shakiness in his mom's voice, Izuku stopped struggling. He looked at his mom, who clearly relaxed. Looking away, Izuku slowly nodded, to 𝐻𝐻𝐽's pleasure. Seeing this, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 slowly let Izuku down the couch as she sighed in relief. She then went to the kitchen to get some drinks, leaving Izuku on his own. Izuku was shifting anxiously on his side of the couch while waiting for his mom to come back. Not really mentally prepared to have a conversation with his mom. In his anxiety, he began to look around in the living room. It had been that long since he had stayed in this room. Izuku was too busy in his conduit training to relax on the couch. If not in training, he was in his room doing his homework, writing quirk entries, and just sleep in general. He was snapped out of his train of thought when a cup was placed in front of him. In front of him was a cup of green tea. Izuku looked at the direction of his mom, who was sitting next to him slowly sipping her tea. Izuku took his cup and slowly sipped it, trying not to burn himself. They stayed like that for a minute or so and was feeling awkward. As Izuku was about to stand up to go to his room as another ditch effort in avoiding the conversation, his mom began to talk. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Izuku barely heard her. Izuku was about to ask her why when she cut her off. "No, Izuku, listen. Don't talk, please," she pleaded, looking at her son. Izuku shut his mouth and quieting down. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 took this as an indication to continue. "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for not supporting you on your dream. I had a choice to either support you after the time you got diagnosed as quirkless. But I chose to apologize to you." A tear fell down on 𝐻𝐻𝐽's cheek as she recalled the memory. She remembered how Izuku was depressed as he asked her if he can be a hero like All Might. "I was so sad that I failed to give you a quirk. I feel like it was my fault that you can't become a hero. I'm sorry for that, Izuku." Izuku was about to interrupt her when she raised a hand, stopping him in his tracks. Reluctantly, he stopped. Sniffing, she continued, "I'm sorry for avoiding you after our last conversation. I have no reason to do that, but I feel like you might need some time to cool off. So I did just that," she said while wiping off another tear. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 held her cup in a grip as she continued talking. "But the time that you hugged me from behind and apologized to me, I couldn't find the right words to say, and when you said that you were hiding the pain so that I won't worry had hurt me." She looked back at Izuku only to see he was looking down his cup. His dark green hair covering his eyes, but the wet streaks coming down his freckled cheeks said it all. He was crying. Taking a deep breath, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 readied herself on the next thing she was going to say. "Here goes nothing." With another deep breath she said it, "And I'm sorry that you had to hide to me that you are a conduit." As she said it, she saw Izuku flinch violently. Her son slowly looked up to her with wide eyes and a shock expression. She also noticed that he was shaking. Seeing his reaction made her cry. "I know. I just found out actually." She chuckled slightly. "What are the chances that you met the Bannerman in person?" Her chuckling ended as she turned towards Izuku and gave him a small smile. "Even though you hid the fact that you are a conduit from me, I can't blame you. I know how conduits are treated in the society, and I know that you are afraid to be isolated from your peers and by extension, from me. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 wiped a tear off her cheeks before finishing her cup of tea and standing up. I saw it in your eyes that day. Fear of being pushed away and isolated. I understand you. Though some things had been in shambles between us, just know that quirkless or not, conduit or not, you will always be my little Izuku. The person who saved me from my end. Thank you, she said as she walked in front of Izuku and placed a small kiss on top of his head. Lifting her head from his head, she smiled sadly. I love you. With that she left for the kitchen. Well, that is when she heard Izuku stand up. She looked back at her son who had just stood up, face shadowed by his hair. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 stared at Izuku as his face began to show a look of hesitation as he slowly turned away. Knowing his son was going to his room, she frowned. Izuku was contemplating what to do. He had been confused after his mom had finished talking. On one hand, he could just accept his mom's apology and mend the relationship they have, and on the other hand, ignore his mom's apology like how she had done to him. It should be an easy choice, but his stressed mind is making it hard for him to decide. Thinking he could use some fresh air, Izuku stood up and slowly turned away. However, as he turned away, he saw in front of him was the picture he had on his desk. It was now placed on top of the table holding the television. His confusion being crushed by emotion, Izuku turned back to his mom and used 𝐻𝐿 to tackle her into a hug. Yelping in surprise, 𝐮𝐻𝐽 caught Izuku on her arms. He was hugging her tightly as he sobbed his eyes out. Muttering apologies and more apologies, 𝐮𝐻𝐽 couldn't handle it any longer and hugged him back. They stayed like that, hugging each other, loving how the feeling of their bodies being close to each other. For the first time since 5 months ago, they felt safe on each other's arms, silently vowing to protect each other in any way possible. As they hugged it out, 𝐮𝐻𝐽 began thinking of Izuku's father and how happy he would be to see them both making up for their mistakes. She smiled as she thought of Izuku's late father 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. High School, an academy that boasts the best education in Japan. It sits atop a forested hill that overlooks 𝐒𝐿, alma mater of All Might and other famous and underrated heroes all over Japan. A place where future heroes study the basics and train their quirks and skills to the fullest. The place where our green-haired conduit can be seen standing in front of said school, looking at the might and glory that the establishment gives out. The reason he is in front of the campus is quite simple. Today was the entrance exam for the new school year. To say that Izuku was excited would be a huge understatement. He was so excited that he hadn't slept, as his body was literally shaking as he laid down on his bed. The green mophead just stared at his room's ceiling and began thinking about how he would ace the exam and get accepted to his dream school. He was so excited that he almost forgot to say goodbye to his mom when he bolted out of their apartment after eating breakfast. Izuku quickly used 𝐻𝐿 to go back inside and give his mom a hug and a kiss on the forehead. He whispered, "I'll be back," and "wish me luck," as he separated from the older Midoriya and ran off the apartment. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 had to suppress a giggle at her son's antics and wish him good luck as she washed the dishes. After their talk and clearing out the misunderstandings they had a couple of months ago, the bond that had been shattered is growing stronger as they slowly but surely fix their relationship. Since then, they have spent time together, making up for the lost time since Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless. They went to parks, picnics, the movies, and shopping. Izuku even applied for a membership at a nearby gym for his mom, to help her lose some weight, be healthier, and become fit like back when Izuku was still young. 𝐮𝐻𝐽 was hesitant at first since they didn't have the money to get the membership, but Izuku was persistent and showed her the money he got from selling his All Might collection. He chuckled when he remembered how she passed out after seeing the amount of money he got, grumbling about how many zeros were in Izuku's bank account. As they talked about what they had been doing in the past months, Izuku told her how he became a conduit and how Bannerman Delsin Rowe had trained him to control his smoke powers. Izuku may or may not have received a bonk on the head when his mom heard how he grabbed an electric-filled hand from his former captor, Akira, the first conduit he encountered. He even told her how he had been conversing with Katsuki. Although she was a tad bit disappointed that Izuku would outright use blackmail to keep the boy in check, 𝐮𝐭 was happy that Izuku had grown out of his shell of anxious insecurity and became more confident, albeit cocky from time to time. Izuku smiled fondly as he remembered how he and his mom grew closer. They promised each other that they would help each other grow and become a better person, son, mother, and friend. A promise Izuku was going to keep and wouldn't think of breaking. His thoughts were cut off by a voice from behind. "Move it, de," came the loud voice of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐽𝐫𝐭, making the green-haired Conduit blink as he turned around to see the scowling ash blonde. Instead of giving him a scowl of his own, Izuku did the opposite. He smiled and waved at the explosive teen. "Good morning to you too, Katsuki. How's your suspension been?" He said it in a cheerful tone, smirking inwardly when he saw the blonde's scowl deepen. Katsuki just got suspended for 3 weeks again. Reason: he tried to use his quirk on Izuku while the greenette was just minding his own business in the cafeteria. Tried, because Izuku had effortlessly dodged the attack, leading to the blonde blasting the food on the table, scattering the food all over the cafeteria floor and, coincidentally, on the school principal, who was just passing by. To say Katsuki was scared is an understatement. He almost got himself expelled if it weren't for his clean record, earning him a suspension instead of expulsion. He was also ordered to write an apology letter to Izuku and wear quirk suppression bracers, which Izuku saw still worn on the blonde's arm. The explosion user gave Izuku a death glare and walked forward, bumping shoulders with the green-haired teen. "Don't stand in my way or I'll kill you." He said this as he walked towards the entrance of the building. "That's a really heroic thing to say there, Katsuki." Izuku retorted at the retreating blonde and shook his head. He never changes. Sighing to himself, he took a step forward towards the building where Bakugo entered. He walked forward at a slow pace. This way he won't trip on his feet. Well, who would be that clumsy to trip on their feet? And just as he thought that, he tripped. "You just had to jinx it, huh, Izuku?" he thought as he let himself fall, seemingly accepting his fate when he noticed that he wasn't falling. He blinked once, blinked twice, and slightly panicked. How was he not falling? "Are you okay?" A feminine voice called out to Izuku, who felt a pair of hands touch his bag and arm before placing him on his feet. "It's my quirk. Sorry for using it on you." The voice of a girl spoke as she placed her hands together and smiled. "Well, it's a bad omen to trip and fall." He looked in the direction of the voice and saw a short girl with shoulder-length brown or auburn hair in a bobbed cut with 2 strands framing her face. She has a round face and eyes similar to Izuku's, and perpetual pink blushes on her cheeks. Observing her face, Izuku can only think of one thing to describe her: cute. Izuku thought as he smiled back at the girl. "Thanks for catching me. Kinda got off balance there. That would have been embarrassing." He scratched the back of his head before reaching out his hand. "Sorry. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you." "I'm Ochako Uraraka. Nice to meet you, Midoriya-kun." She said this as she took his hand and shook it. Looking down, Izuku noticed that her pinky finger was sticking out. That made Izuku's eyebrows rise. A touch-based quirk. Interesting. He mentally took note as he and Uraraka let go of each other's hands. Izuku also noted that her hands are cold and soft. That thought made him blush a bit. "It was nice meeting you. But I'll head on first. Good luck to both of us, Midoriya-kun." The girl said this as she walked past Izuku, waving at the greenette, who in turn waved back. "Right, good luck to you too, Ochako-chan." He said this while smiling at the girl, not noticing the sudden increase in red on her face when he called her by her first name. Not to mention the affectionate suffix. Izuku looked at the retreating girl, her smile still in place. "I just talked to a girl. A cute one, that is," he thought as he took a step forward, this time looking down to make sure he wouldn't trip on his feet again. As he entered the building, he looked over his exam room number for the written exam and walked around in search of his room number. As Izuku looked for his room number, in a dimly lit room, a stout man that looked like a mixture of a dog, a mouse, and a bear could be seen sitting in front of the large screen. This person, rodent, is Nizu, the principal of UA High School. Said Chimera was sitting idly on his chair as he read through the files of the examinees, looking at the promising candidates for the hero course. He takes a folder, reads the contents, closes it, and places it on the table. He repeats this with the other files, over and over again, until he stumbled upon an interesting file. Izuku Midoriya years old Aldra Middle School quirkless. Nizu raised an eyebrow at this. He had expected that there would be quirkless students attending the entrance exam. He was the one who released the rule of allowing quirkless students to try on the exams. But something about this particular student piqued the Chimera's interest. He began to read the boy's record to study just who Izuku Midoriya is and what makes him special in Nizu's eyes. As he read the green-haired boy's file, a maniacal laugh could be heard throughout the corridor, scaring those who walked by or entered the room. Well, that written exam was a lot easier than I anticipated, Izuku thought as he took a seat next to a fuming Bakugo, who had glared daggers at him. Izuku just ignored him and took the leaflet that one of the examiners gave him before entering the room. He analyzed the information in the handouts and nodded to himself. So the practicals consist of earning points by destroying villains in a form of robots. The robots vary in shape, size, and the number of points they give out. Villain points. The robots consist of 4 types, one with 1 point, one with 2 points, one with 3 points, which is the highest point, and 0 pointers. The one that is considered worthless but has a red warning sign on it, meaning it is the most difficult to handle. Izuku furrowed his eyes in confusion when he read this. How could the one with the fewest points have the highest potential to hurt students? There was something odd about this exam, and he couldn't put his finger on it. And you with the curly green hair. Izuku was cut off his inner musings when he heard a loud voice call out. Blinking to himself, Izuku looked up from the handout and looked in the direction of the voice. Looking up, he was confused to see the majority of the people in the room were looking at him, and a tall, blue-haired boy with glasses was standing rows ahead of him, pointing at Izuku. A disapproving glare can be seen on the tall boy's face. You haven't been listening this whole time. It is quite unpleasant for a student who aims to get accepted in you, the tall boy said, still glaring at Izuku. If you aren't going to take this exam seriously, then please leave immediately. Izuku blinked at the boy's statement. He chuckled inwardly, knowing he had gotten too focused on the handout that he zoned out. Though the guy was right that he wasn't paying attention, he wasn't happy that the blue hair guy had obviously interrupted the explanation, judging by present Mick's frown directed at the prick. He thought of shutting the boy down, but he was still deep in thought about what he had just read and still wanted to keep reading the leaflet. That's why Izuku found the best solution when you were in this situation. Izuku held the handout in his hand before opening it in a very dramatic way and placing his face in the small piece of paper, completely ignoring the tall boy. Said boy had his left eye twitching in indignation and irritation as chuckles and giggles could be heard throughout the place. He had just been ignored by some delinquents who didn't even dare to listen to present Mick's explanation. He was about to call Izuku out again. The loud hero interrupted him and further explained the exams. As present Mike gave them another word of encouragement, Izuku could feel the glare coming from the tall boy from earlier and Katsuki's as well. He shrugged them off and quickly went to the changing room to get ready for the practical exams, mind still processing the hidden meaning of the exam. As he changed into his green jumpsuit and red shoes 𝐴/N, like in canon, I think, before going to the designated buses to where their exams are being held. This place is massive, Izuku said to himself as he whistled in amazement at how wide the replica city district is. He began doing light stretches as he waited for the exam to start. Midway through his stretches, he looked around to see who he is with. He saw everyone doing their thing, talking to each other, doing stretches, meditating, and, weirdly enough, winking in a random direction. As he was looking around, his eyes saw a familiar patch of auburn hair. Near the gates, he saw Uraraka standing there, eyes closed, fanning herself. Judging by her looks, Izuku can tell that she's nervous and is trying to calm herself down. Izuku smiled at this and decided to leave her alone. His eyes then wandered to the top of the gate, and he saw the gate slightly move. Izuku took that as a signal to get ready. He took a step to head towards the front of the group. Coincidentally, towards Uraraka. That girl seems to be doing some kind of meditation. A voice called out, Izuku knew, by the sound of it, that it was the tall, blue-haired boy from earlier. The guy seems to be bothering someone, but Izuku didn't mind it since he wasn't the one the guy was talking to. Or so he thought when a hand gripped his shoulder, making him turn around. Izuku's green eyes met glaring dark blue ones. "Why are you here?" To interf. He was cut off when Izuku slapped his hand off the conduit's shoulder. Eyes portraying annoyance. "Don't touch me." 2. "What do you mean by interfere?" "I was just trying to go to the front since it's too cramped in here. I can't move well," Izuku said with a glare as he pointed to the front of the crowd, which had more space. "And finally, why don't you stop jumping to conclusions and mind your own goddamn business? Just because you look similar to 𝐮𝐻𝐸𝐴 doesn't give you the right to judge people when they're clearly minding their own business," Izuku said as he stomped to the front, making the tall boy blink at his action. The crowd began to murmur some inaudible things, when Izuku suddenly turned into a cloud of smoke and dashed towards the slightly open gate. The rest were confused at this and were about to laugh and call out Izuku for his stupidity, when Present Mic's voice echoed throughout the place. "And begin." They were all startled by the loud voice and looked at the gate, where Izuku had just made through the exit. Dumbfounded, everyone in the section blinked as they stared at the spot where Izuku had been. At that moment, Present Mic's voice rang once again. "What's the matter? There's no such thing as a countdown in a real battle. Go. Run." With that, the remaining examinees began frantically running towards the gate. As they exited the gates, they were flabbergasted to see Izuku hitting, breaking, and slashing every robot that came into his sight with a long chain. All the while, counting out loud. Uraraka looked at the green-haired boy with awe and amazement. He was destroying and dodging the robots with ease and precision, like it was second nature to him. They watched Izuku wrap his chain around his wrist and use smoke drain to absorb the smoke coming from the destroyed robots before looking in their direction. Izuku looked shocked at first before he narrowed his eyes. He began channeling smoke with his left hand, charging up a cinder blast, and pointing in the direction of the onlookers. The crowd began panicking when Izuku pointed an attack towards them. As they used their quirks or anything around them to block whatever attack the greenette was charging up, they heard an explosion and a loud thud from behind. Turning around, they widen their eyes when they see a three-pointer without a head lying on the ground, charred and sparking. They stared at the downed robot for a moment before looking back at the smirking Izuku, who still had his arm outstretched. 25 points, he said to no one in particular as he winked at the crowd before smoke enveloped his body. Later. And with that, Izuku used smoke dash to navigate an alleyway as explosions could be heard in the background, leaving a dumbfounded crowd who began frantically destroying any robot they came across. Dropping another robot to the ground, Uraraka looked at the alleyway where Izuku had just gone through and began to think to herself. "Just who are you, Midoriya-kun?" With Nizu in the same dimly lit room as earlier, Nizu sat in front of a screen that overlooked the whole practical exams. He was smiling cheerfully as he observed each student doing their best to get as many points as they could. A strict time limit and a vast battleground. There's nothing quite like it to bring the zeal in everyone's heart into the field and how their skills. Pausing, he looked to his left to see an examinee with 6 arms in a web-like pattern spread out, standing on top of a small building. The ability to grasp the situation quickly and accurately, he said as he looked over to the top to see the same tall boy, using his legs that somehow have engines to kick a swarm of robots into pieces. The ability to create a dynamic entry without being late to the party. He then looked to the right to see a boy with blonde hair shooting lasers from his navel at the robots in front of him while somehow looking at the camera. This made most of the onlookers shiver. How the hell did he notice the camera? Nizu chuckled as he spoke again, the ability to face any obstacle with a cool, calm composure. He then looked in the center to see 2 different screens side by side. On the screen, one shows Katsuki destroying a 3-pointer robot with a feral smirk on his face. The other shows Izuku dodging a 2-pointer robot's massive fist by turning into smoke, phasing through it, and blowing it up with a quick smoke shot to the exposed metal neck. And of course, sheer fighting prowess. He smiled as he looked to his sides at the other occupants in the room. We can gauge their respective levels of those foundational skills by way of the point system. The mouse/dog/bear man finished as the other occupants nodded at his statement. "Oh my, we've raked in an interesting bunch this year." The sultry voice of the 18-plus hero, Midnight, said as she licked her lower lip. "We can't be sure of that yet," All Might said, lifting the cover of a red button. "The real test starts now." He said this as he pushed the red button, and a loud horn echoed throughout the battlefield. "With Izuku, and that's the last of them." He said this as he whipped his chain back to his wrist and used smoke drain on the smoking pile of destroyed robots. He smiled at his accomplishments and wiped a bead of sweat from his chin. "I'm pretty sure 71 points is enough to pass, right?" He said nothing to anyone in particular as he sighed. To say the exams had been weird would be like saying that Bakugo smells like burnt bananas. Well, that'll be blasphemous to the banana. Izuku just met the weirdest bunch in these exams. First, as he was running around the field in search of robots, he saw a short kid with purple spheres attached to his head being chased by a three-pointer. Seeing the kid in a state of panic, Izuku did what he thought was best and destroyed the robot, saving the purple-haired bald. This act of kindness, however, enraged the midget, who screamed at Izuku, telling him that he stole the boy's point. This almost made Izuku punt the short kid to next week, but he decided not to. The Conduit just apologized, and smoke dashed away, leaving the midget to himself. After that unfortunate encounter, on his 50th point, Izuku found another robot. This time it was a two-pointer. It was a robot that looked like a scorpion. Izuku did quick work with its pincers and stinger and was about to finish it off, when a laser beam hit the robot, destroying it in the process. Izuku was livid. Someone just stole his point. He looked at the culprit and saw that the one who stole his point was the blonde kid that keeps looking and/or winking in a random direction. What angered Izuku was that the kid just ran away after taking the point. Izuku was about to beat the living CRP out of the blonde kid when he saw a tall kid with messy, indigo-colored hair that flared out in large tufts around his head and notably straight teeth. Said kid was having trouble with the robots and was backed up into a corner. Like what he did to the short kid, he destroyed the robot, saving the boy in the process. And like what happened with the short kid, this one also got mad at him but didn't say it verbally. He just glared at him, slapped off the outstretched hand that Izuku offered when he fell down, and walked off without even saying thank you. At this moment, Izuku got angry and just released all the built-up anger on any robot he saw. In just a minute or two, he got 19 points, making him earn 69 points in total. Izuku was about to leave that area when a two-pointer dropped down in front of him, and out of reflex, he used his chain to WHP the poor excuse for a toaster and cut its head off. Izuku was pulled out of his thoughts when the loud sound of a horn echoed around the replica city district, followed by a small earthquake and distant explosions. The earthquake startled Izuku a bit, and before looking around, he saw a vent on the side of a building and used vent dash. Popping out on the rooftop of the building, he quickly analyzed the situation. Looking down, he saw all of the examinees running away from something as the earthquake continued. By earthquake, he meant the zero-pointer robot was a couple of meters away from his location, destroying every building it came across. He looked down the path where the gigantic robot was moving and gained wide eyes as his heart skipped a bit. Down there, he saw Uraraka under a rubble, struggling to get out. By the look of her pale face, she overused her quirk, whatever it is. Without thinking, Izuku summoned his smoke and jumped down the building, landing with a loud thud. He began smoke dashing towards the fallen girl's direction. Not noticing the taller boy with blue hair running past him, looking at him with shock. Izuku continued dashing forward before stopping in front of the girl. Kneeling down, he touched the girl's hand and looked at her worriedly. "Are you okay, Ochako-chan?" he asked, looking at her while slipping glances at the rampaging robot. The girl didn't answer verbally, but just gave him a look and shook her head. Izuku sucked on his teeth and studied the rubble on top of the girl's leg. He saw that it was just one large slab, and with his enhanced strength, Izuku could easily lift it. "She only needs to crawl." "Can you move?" he asked the girl. Uraraka shook her head again and winced. "I think my ankle is broken." That caused Izuku to panic and look at the zero-pointer, which was almost near them. He didn't hesitate. Touching the slab, Izuku used his enhanced strength to gently push the slab off the girl. After making sure that the slab was completely off the girl, he carried her bridal style and smoke dashed away, barely dodging a massive fist that landed on the spot where the two were. When they were near the others, Izuku stopped and looked back at the zero-pointer, who was destroying another building. He saw more examinees running towards them, and some were tripping on debris. Izuku couldn't help but be worried. He looked down at 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿, who was still wincing and looking at the gigantic robot. Izuku had two choices. He just run away as the zero-pointer destroyed the whole place and injured more students. Or B. Let 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 down, destroy the zero-pointer, and stop it from destroying everything. Without hesitation, Izuku slowly placed the injured girl down, earning a confused look from 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿. He simply gave her a reassuring smile, before turning into a cloud of smoke and dashing towards the giant robot. Ignoring the yell from 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿, he used the double air dash when a chunk of a building was thrown at him. Izuku landed in front of the giant robot and crouched down. He was about to use a move that he never really practiced, just told of its details. As he crouched down and charged up the orbital drop, the behemoth saw him and sent its massive fists towards him. The onlookers began to panic, even the U staff, with the exception of 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 and All Might, who had seen Izuku approach the zero-pointer. As the robot's fist landed on Izuku, well on the spot where the boy had been, 3 balls of smoke spun around the metal limb and passed it before they all collided with each other as Izuku appeared in the air. Then, as he was in the air, Izuku tilted his upper body to let himself fall down, with his fist outstretched towards the head of the zero-pointer and his smoke thrusters activated for a faster velocity and a stronger force. As Izuku's smoke-covered fist collided with the zero-pointer, a massive explosion occurred, making the other examinees cover their eyes to shield them from the blast. Then the sound of clattering rubble and metal could be heard as they removed their hands from their eyes. What they saw made their eyes widen. The once enormous robot can be seen shattered into literal pieces. Smoke covered the whole place as the rest of the robot caught fire. They were still looking at the destruction that had happened when the smoke in the place began to move in an unusual way, as if it were being sucked by a vacuum. After a solid 10 seconds, the smoke in the area completely dissipated, and in the center of it all was Izuku Midoriya, standing straight with his hands outstretched as his arms glow orange. Dropping his arms down, Izuku sighed in relief as Present Mic's voice echoed around the city district. Time's up. With 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿, the chimera began smiling as he stared at the boy. He recognized that move and knew only one person who had done it before. The most important qualifications of a hero. The spirit of self-sacrifice. 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 said as he picked up Izuku Midoriya's file once again and stared at the boy's eye. Pictures stapled on the file. Strong kid, I'll give you that. The voice of Vlad King rang in the room. His statement earned him nods of agreement from his co-staff. I call dibs. Midnight's cheerful and excited voice echoed in the room, earning her waves of groans and sighs. Shota Aizawa, to raise her head, just shook his head while grumbling about not getting for this SHT. Izuku Midoriya is a very interesting student indeed. 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 spoke up, making the people in the room look at him. Smart, strong, and has a heroic and kind nature. He is highly spoken of by the principal of his school and has a clean record, he said, not taking his eyes off the file. Present Mike, who just entered the room right after Midnight talked, made his presence known. He's definitely going to be in the hero course, right? I mean, he has enough villain points and secret points. Heck, he even has a strong quirk. This earned nods and vocal agreement from the rest of the people in the room, except for All Might and 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿. Actually, he's quirkless. 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 said blankly at the group, making a tense silence from the group. He smirked inwardly as he began mentally counting. What? The group had to cover their ears as Present Mike and Midnight's voices echoed in the small room. 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 began to laugh maniacally as he saw the ridiculous looks the two pros were giving him. If he only had a camera. What do you mean his quirkless? You saw how he demolished the zero-pointer. No quirkless person can do that. The voice of 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐨, the power loader, spoke up. A tone of incredulity can be heard in his voice. Also, what can you call that smoke thingy he used? That's definitely a quirk. Midnight said as she replayed the footage of Izuku destroying robots with smoke shots and cinder blasts. But that is the truth. He is most definitely quirkless. It confirms here in his file that he really is quirkless, he said as he passed the file to Aizawa, who immediately scanned the file. Which means his powers aren't a quirk. The people in the room stayed quiet as they waited for Nizu to continue when Aizawa groaned, getting their attention. You don't mean? He grumbled as Nizu's smile widened. Yes. He nodded and looked at the screen. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we have a conduit in the exam. A week later, Izuku sat nervously in his room as he stared at the envelope that contains the letter from 𝐻𝐮𝐻𝐽. It just arrived a couple of minutes ago and he hadn't moved an inch to peek at the letter in front of him. He began taking deep breaths to calm himself. Kind of funny how he can demolish a robot with the size of a skyscraper and is scared of a small letter. Well, he may have become more confident socially ever since he met Delsin, but that doesn't change the fact that he is still Izuku Midoriya. The same kid who got suspended for breaking 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫𝐭's nose and former All Might fanboy. After wasting 2 minutes, he took the envelope and opened it. Gently tilting the envelope down, he was surprised to see a small yellow disc with the red letter 𝐻 written on the top of it. Izuku inspected the disc for a bit before finding a small button on the side. Not seeing anything wrong with it, he clicked it and a hologram appeared. His eyes widened when he saw who was in the hologram. In the streets of Mustafu, sounds of footsteps can be heard as a figure was jumping from building to building. The sun is not up yet, but the figure gracefully and perfectly performs some flips and vaults over trash cans, ramps and railings. The precision and grace he shows in the tricks he performs would make even Delsin Rowe in shame. As the figure performed a monkey vault over a railing, he let himself drop and landed his feet on ledge of a building. Panting slightly, he turned around to the rising sun that slowly lit up Japan. Smiling at the view, the figure didn't even notice the wind build up and blew off his hoodie, revealing his forest green hair and matching eyes. Said figure can be identified as Izuku Midoriya, a conduit. An excited glint in his eyes can be seen as he gazed at the rising ball of light. Today was his first day of class in 𝐻𝐻, a high school, and to say he was excitement was an understatement. Ever since he got the results from the entrance exam, he became giddy and jumpy. Well, who wouldn't when the person you admire and look up to gave him the results of his exam? Flashback. Izuku stared at the projector with wide eyes. He was expecting a pro hero that works at 𝐻𝐻 to give him the results of his entrance exam. He was expecting either Present Mike or Midnight to show up as a hologram, but he didn't expect it to be his mentor, Delsin Rowe, to appear before him as a hologram. Hey, Izuku. How's it been? The banner man in his usual attire of white hoodie and denim vest said with a wave. Before Izuku could stutter out a response, Delsin spoke up. And before you talk back to me like an idiot, don't. This is just a recorded message from 𝐻𝐻, he said with a knowing smirk. Izuku had to stop a blush from forming on his face. Delsin knew him well, even with the small time they spent with each other. Anyway, let's go to your scores. Delsin suddenly took out a card from his denim vest and cleared his throat. In the written test, you have score 99 over 100% correct answers, ranking yourself in the first place, closely followed by 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 with 98.9%. Izuku saw the small smirk from the man and smirked to himself. He knew that Del wasn't supposed to reveal that, yet the older conduit shared the results to the greenette. Izuku knew that Delsin just wanted to give him more information about the blonde's test. And hearing that he got a higher score than the blonde made his day. Delsin then flipped the card and read the other contents. And now for the practical test. During that portion of the exam, you were able to accumulate 71 villain points. Enough to pass and enough to land you straight to second place, only behind 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, that caused a frown to appear on Izuku's face. His frown, however, was removed when Delsin continued. Well, that would be the case if villain points were the only points that is needed in the exams. The screen then shifted to two words that caught his attention. Rescue points. He read the words out loud before it disappeared, and the scene then shows him in the exam. The moment he separately saved the grape-head midget and sleep-deprived kid from getting hurt or potentially killed by the robots from the exam. He shook of the anger and irritation that he felt back in the exam, as the two didn't even acknowledge his good deed and even brushed him off, going far to accusing him of stealing their points. Ungrateful bastards. He whispered as he stared back at the projection and saw himself run over to 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿, who almost got crushed by the zero-pointer, and brought her to safety. It then showed him performing the orbital drop to the skyscraper-sized robot and blowing it up to shreds. He awed at himself for performing the move perfectly. It was dangerous to do it without practice, but hey, he did it and was able to save people because of it. Plus, it looked awesome. That's what matters. As Izuku waited for the projection to turn back to Delsin, his eyes widened when the scene changed to 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐿 with her school uniform talking to Present Mike. He was shocked to hear that she wants to give him some of her points for saving her, only for her offer to be brushed off by Present Mike. The hero then told her to cheer up, and there will be surprise for both of them. With your act of heroism, the school judges awards you 10 points for saving the grape-headed boy, 10 points for saving the sleep-deprived kid, 20 for saving the cute girl, and lastly, 30 points for stopping the zero-pointer from destroying the area and potentially hurting the other examinees in the area. Delsin smiled fondly. I would have gave you 70 points for performing the orbital drop perfectly, but I don't work at you. Which sucks. Izuku saw the man pout a bit, making him sweat drop. He forgot how childish his friend/mentor can be. A voice was heard in the background. Yeah, he did the orbital drop better than you do. It was Fetch. Izuku saw a tick mark appear on Delsin's forehead as he glared at a direction. Shut up, Fetch. He then heard the woman laugh and the older Conduit sighed. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at the duo's antics. God, I miss them. Anyway, adding them up, you have accumulated a total of 70 rescue points, and adding that to the villain points, Izuku Midoriya, you have gained a total of 141 points. Izuku's eyes widen. 141 points. Does that mean, which means, you not only ranked first place in the practical test, you also beaten All Might's personal record of 115 total points. Great job. The screen then showed the list of the rankings, and Izuku immediately saw his name above Katsuki Izuku Midoriya VP, 71, RP, 70 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 VP, 77, ARP, 0 AG Kirishima VP, 39, RP, 35 Ochako Uraraka VP, 20, RP, 45 Ibara Shiozaki VP, 36, RP, 32 Itsuka Kendo VP, 25, RP, 40 Tenya Ida VP, 52, RP, 9 Tetsutetsu VP, 49, RP, 10 Fumikage Tokoyami VP, 47, RP, 10 Yosetsu Aways VP, 50, RP, 6 Seeing his name above Katsuki's name gave Izuku a feeling of pride and dread. Pride, because he just defeated Katsuki on something that is mathematically counted. Dread, because he knows that there will be an inevitable confrontation with the blonde tomorrow. Well, that will be a lot of explaining for Izuku, or will it? Shaking his head out of his thoughts of Katsuki, he looked back at the hologram which returned back to Delsin. He smiled at his mentor's face and listened to him talk. Congratulations on passing the entrance exam and welcome to your hero academia. You will be attending as a part of Class 1A of the Heroics Department. I hope you do your best and kick some butt though. Delsin's voice was cut off from another voice, this time coming from another man which Izuku doesn't recognize. Delsin. We have a situation near the Empire State Building. It's him again, the voice said with annoyance in the end. Delsin sighed. Him again. This is the 7th time this week and it's only Tuesday. He grumbled before looking back at Izuku. Well, that's all I guess. Good luck, Izuku. I'm so proud of you. Till we meet again, I'll be rooting for you. He said before turning around. Send me the coordinate, was the last thing Delsin said as the projector ended. Flashback end. Izuku smiled as he remembered that moment. He immediately ran to his mom and told her the news. Let's just say that Izuku had to open every window in the apartment to drain the flood caused by his mom's tears. To how she does that is an enigma to him. Probably a dormant quirk, or genetic. After they calmed down, by them, I mean 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐭, his mom prepared him a large bowl of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 to celebrate his achievement, which he ate with glee. As Izuku jumped off the ledge of the building and landed gracefully with the help of 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐫𝐭. It had been a habit for Izuku to do free running ever since it had been introduced to him by Delsin. After learning and struggling to keep up with his mentor, Izuku had made it a morning ritual to do some laps before the sun rises. With this, it helps keep his free-running skills and the coordination of his body. It also helps Izuku calm down from his problems. Problems caused by one 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. As Izuku expected, the ash-blonde boy threw a hissy fit after seeing the results of their entrance exam. After getting congratulated by their homeroom teacher, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 pulled him to a corner and demanded him answers on how he had cheated his way to you. Normally, Izuku would ignore this, but the blonde was questioning his intellectual ability and how he bribed his test results. It annoyed him. And when 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 began spewing bullshit about Izuku stealing his glory, Izuku had enough. So after a surprise punch on the gut, Izuku gave 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 a little reality check. He told the blonde that he didn't give a damn about his so-called glory, and called 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 stupid for assuming that the best hero school in Japan, would be that easy to bribe. After that, Izuku left the blonde boy on the ground, cursing and grumbling about quirkless losers looking down on him. Izuku was brought out of reverie when his wristwatch began beeping. Looking at it, he nodded to himself when he saw that it was almost time for him to get ready for school. With a quick smoke dash, Izuku made his way home without getting noticed by any patrolling heroes or police officers. He was excited to go to 𝐻𝐿. The first step of becoming a hero. The first Conduit hero. 𝐀𝐮𝐻𝐸𝐵, also known as Eraserhead, quietly sat comfortably on a sofa in the teacher's lounge while looking over the files of his soon-to-be students, if they don't get expelled in the first day. He was more focused on the one particular student he found interest in, Izuku Midoriya. Ever since he found out that the boy was a conduit, and 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 confirming it to the rest of the staff of the boy's conduit status, some of the staff were pushing for Midoriya's instant expulsion. But 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 quickly rejected this and told them that the boy would do no harm to the school. Though some of them were still skeptical at this decision, reluctantly agree, when 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 threatened to remove them of their hero ranks if they ever touched the boy. Aizawa was confused at this. Why would 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 want a conduit to enter the school? Is it because of his power similarity to a certain bannerman? He was snapped out of his thoughts when the school bell was heard throughout the campus. Sighing, he stood up and placed the student files on the table and walked out of the door, his trusty yellow sleeping bag in hand. He still has a class to teach or expel. Whatever comes first. And whatever 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸's reason is, 𝐀𝐮𝐻𝐸𝐵 didn't know what it is. But he will follow what 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 ordered. Just like what 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 always says, the rat god is always right, whatever that SHT means. 1A, where the heck is class 1A? Izuku said as he ran the hallways of 𝐻𝐸. He had came in early after he ate breakfast, changed his clothes to his uniform, and said goodbye to his mom. When he entered the campus, he marveled at the beauty of said school. As he passed the hallways, he noticed that there are no students walking around the hallways. Probably because he was so early. Or maybe because it was the first day. Izuku noticed this from his middle school class. Not much students go early due to there are no lesson on the first day of class. Maybe it's just him. Shrugging that thought out his mind, he continued his search for his class. Reaching his classroom, he stared at the size of the door for solid 5 seconds before entering. As he entered, he noticed that he was the first one there. Again, not surprised by this. He walked towards the back corner of the class, and took the furthest spot near the window /and Momo's cannon spot. Looking at his phone, seeing that he still has 50 minutes before class starts, he set an alarm for 35 minutes and dozed off for a bit. There was still time for some much-needed rest. Minutes later, don't put your legs on the desk. Don't you think that's disrespectful towards our upperclassmen? Before the alarm could go off, Izuku woke up when he heard bantering. Lifting his head up a bit to look at the commotion. At the sight of the people causing the ruckus made his eyes twitch. Of course they're here. he thought sarcastically as he rubbed his eyes and stretched while staring at the two people who he wished were not in his class with a deadpan look. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 and the blue-haired guy from the exam. He saw the blue-haired guy standing beside Katsuki's desk, while the blonde sat back with his feet on the desk. He saw the blonde scoff. "No. As a matter of fact, I don't really care. Which middle school are you from anyway, you extra?" Hearing this made Izuku's eyes roll. "𝐒𝐮𝐩𝐸𝐵 never changes. I'm from 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 Junior High School. My name's 𝐶𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐬𝐷𝐴." The tall boy said, introducing himself to the blonde who just smirked. At least that's what Izuku thought the blonde was doing. He was at the back of the class. "𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐬𝐷𝐴. Well, aren't you an elite? Another reason for me to crush you." 𝐒𝐮𝐻𝐸 boasted, making Iida flinch incredulously while Izuku snorted at the boy's reaction. "Crush me? Do you really want to be a hero?" Iida gasped in shock. Izuku blocked the two idiots bantering and used that moment to look around the class. It was almost filled with students. He looked at his classmates and found them interesting. Mainly a girl with two-toned hair, a pink-skinned/haired girl with cute horns, a boy with a raven head, a girl with vines for hair and a girl with spiky red hair. The last one looks familiar and feels like he already met her somewhere, but he couldn't remember where. As his eyes traveled around the classroom, that was the moment a figure appeared in front of him. Midoriya-kun. I knew I recognized that mop of green hair somewhere. Glad to see you here. He looked at the person who was in front of him and widened his eyes. A smile made its way to his face. "Ochako-chan. Looks like you passed," Izuku said, greeting the brunette, who smiled back at him. As Izuku conversed with Uraraka, a blur of blue made its way in front of the greenette. It was Iida, who was looking at Izuku with a disappointed look on his face. "Excuse me. I'm 𝐶𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐸𝐷𝐴 from 𝐀𝐮 Junior High School. It's nice to meet you, but sleeping in class is not a great trait of a hero," Iida said as he chopped his left arm in the most robotic way possible. Not wanting to deal with the annoying and/or noisy teen, he looked at Iida with a blank expression. You said something." Instantly, Iida fell on his face comically. Izuku heard laughter and giggles from the class and made him look around the other students. He was so sure he saw a patch of purple sphere somewhere near his row in front of him as his eyes locked with Katsuki, who was glaring at him with hate. Not really caring, Izuku looked away from the blonde who was ready to lunge at him. "Deku, you be sturdy," Katsuki thought as he glared daggers at the greenette, plotting ways to put him to his place. As his classmates laughed at the still-downed Iida, Izuku's eyes went to the door as it opened. He was confused when no one entered, but caught a glimpse of yellow on the ground. He then straightened his body and turned to Uraraka. The girl was patting Iida, who just got up. "I think you two should go back to your seats. The teacher is here," he whispered to the two, who raised their eyebrows at him. Uraraka just shrugged and went to her seat while Iida was about to ask him what he meant by that when a voice cut him off. "If you're all here to socialize, go elsewhere," a voice said coming from the door, making the class WHP towards his direction. What they saw was a man in a yellow sleeping bag, lying on the floor. The man looked at the students with a blank expression. The man then took out a juice box and like a maniac emptied the whole thing in one go. "Who the hell is this guy?" was the thought of every single student as they watched the man crawled like a caterpillar to the center of the classroom. Izuku looked on the man with interest. Once the man was in the center, he shifted in his sleeping bag and came out of it. He then stared at the class for a second before speaking. Excluding the green-haired kid at the back, "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. Disappointing, but oh well," he said, taking a quick glance at Izuku before continuing. "I will be your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Pleasure to meet you," Aizawa said in a tired tone. The class were wide-eyed at this. "There's no way this hobo is our homeroom teacher," they all thought as the man began rummaging in his sleeping bag, somewhat looking for something. As the man searched in his sleeping bag, Izuku looked at the man with analytical eyes. The man was wearing a black long-sleeve shirt, black pants, bandages around his neck as a scarf, and a pair of yellow goggles can be seen on his neck. As he was looking at the man, Aizawa took out what looks like a pair of dark blue pants with white vertical lines going up the legs and a dark blue short sleeve shirt with white lines that formed the letters U and. The man threw it at Ida, who was the only one not in his seat. Wear those immediately, and quickly go to the training grounds in 15 minutes. He said as he gave the remaining gym uniforms to the rest of the class before exiting the room. Izuku, right after getting his gym uniform, stood up and walked out of the room to change. His classmates quickly followed his example and went to the changing rooms. After changing, everyone immediately made their way to the training grounds as instructed. Not without asking for directions from the staff. They knew what he is, and they're being cautious of him. Good thing no one else but him saw these looks. Izuku saw their slight glares and flinches when they saw him. A sick feeling of déjà vu washed over him like cold water as memories from his middle school days when his old class used to bully and glare at him for just being there appeared in his. It hurt him. It almost made him tear up, but remembered how Delsin told him how conduits are treated worse than quirkless people. Blinking the tears away, he quickly shrugged off the bad memories and followed the class to the training grounds. Seeing the class arrive in time, albeit barely, Aizawa started. Now that everyone is here, we will be having a quirk apprehension test. A quirk apprehension test! Exclaimed the whole class minus Izuku, who flinched a bit but kept listening intently at the man, a raven-haired girl with a ponytail, and the girl with dual-toned hair. Excuse me, what about the entrance ceremony and the guidance counselor meeting? Uraraka asked in genuine curiosity. The man just shrugged and looked at her. If you want to be heroes, there is no time for leisure activities. He turned to the class. 𝐻 is famous when it comes to freedom for students in the campus. That also applies to us instructors. He then turned to the field where there are some gym equipment and mats laid down the ground. Softball pitch, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running, gripping test, sustained sideways jumps, upper body exercises and seated toe touch. He said as he listed all the different physical activities. Looking back to the students. These are the activities you know from middle school. Physical tests where you were barred from using your quirks. He walked towards a basket full of softballs and took one. Turning around, he looked directly at Izuku, who tensed up a bit before straightening up. He then tossed the ball to the greenette, who caught it with one hand. Midoriya, how far can you pitch a softball in middle school? Izuku thought for a bit before looking back at the man. I believe it was 56 meters, sensei. He said unsure. Or was it 65? Aizawa nodded and took out a device from his scarf. Throw that ball using your quirk this time. You are free to do anything, as long as you don't exit the circle. The man said tiredly. Izuku caught the slight emphasis when he said quirk and sighed. As he walked to the circle, from the corner of his eye, he can see Katsuki smirking smugly. He's gonna embarrass himself. Bakugo scoffed, keeping his smug look intact. This caught the class's attention. What do you mean? Ida asked with a raised eyebrow, curiosity getting the best of him. He doesn't have a quirk. Bakugo said in a tone that didn't hid his smugness. Are you certain? Ida asked the explosive blonde. Because he was in our section and I saw him destroy robots with ease using a smoke-based quirk. Yeah, he also transforms into smoke and destroyed a zero-pointer like it was nothing. Uraraka chimed in, clearly confused what Bakugo was talking about. This caused the majority of the class to widen their eyes with the mention of the zero-pointer, while the same girl with a ponytail and dual-toned girl to look confused of what this zero-pointer is. Katsuki frowned at this and glared at Uraraka and Ida. What the F.A.? His words were cut off when he suddenly saw Izuku's left arm and the softball lit up in orange color. What the? Izuku, who was standing in the circle, clutched the ball tightly as he listened at Katsuki's word. Wanting to shut the blonde idiot up, he then assumed a pitch stance and activated his powers, lighting up his left arm and the ball with an orange glow as smoke covered it. Rearing his arm behind and with enough force, he threw the ball to the sky. With a bang, the ball propelled upwards with a force strong enough to break the sound barrier. The sudden throw and sound caused the class to yelp in surprise, most notably a tall boy with 6 webbed arms and a face mask and a petite girl with earlobes that looked like earphone jacks were the most affected. It took a solid 15 seconds before the ball landed on the ground. As this was happening, Aizawa had his eyes going back and forth from Izuku and to the device he was holding. He was somewhat impressed on the strength of the throw. For someone who doesn't have a quirk, he shows great control over his abilities. He was snapped out of his trance when another explosion rang in the field. This time it didn't came from Midoriya's place. 𝐻𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐨𝐫. What was that? Explain now, you piece of 𝐻𝐮𝐩𝐻𝐨. Bakugo yelled as he propelled towards Izuku using the explosions on his palms, and right where he was about to blow the greenette to smithereens, he was stopped by a strong strand of cloth. He was tried struggling and use his quirk to escape the cloth, only to find out he can't use his quirk. Gah! What the f is this? Why can't I use my quirk? As Bakugo was yelling profanities, the girl with vines as hair looked at the blonde with disgust. Such blasphemous language. She whispered as she assumed a praying position. It's my special capture weapon, a steel wire alloy woven with carbon nanofibers. Aizawa said as he glared with his red eyes at the explosive teen, who sweat a little. As for your quirk, I erased it. That caught Izuku's attention. He then looked at the man restraining Katsuki and saw that the man's eyes are glowing red and hair floating. Izuku began to remember a rumor of an underground hero who works at 𝐻𝐮𝐸 that is notorious when it comes to expelling students on the first day. And the fact that he can erase quirks made Izuku confirm that underground hero in the rumors is this man right here. Eraser head, Izuku said to himself, loud enough for the hero to hear him. The man stared at him for a bit before looking back at Katsuki. Glowing crimson eyes glaring daggers at the teen's own crimson eyes. I don't care if you have a history with Midoriya, but know this Katsuki Bakugo. He paused to grip the bandage tighter, making the blonde groan uncomfortably. If you ever attack a fellow student, may it be a classmate or not, you will be dealt with. I will not tolerate bullying. He finished as he let the explosion user go. He then deactivated his quirk. He then looked at the direction of Midoriya, who was watching him carefully. As much as I don't want to pry between you and Bakugo's relationship, I too am curious of how you do that. Your file says you're quirkless just like Bakugo said, but you are able to do that. Eraserhead said as he looked back at the distant ball and back at Izuku. Care to explain how's that possible? Izuku tensed a bit at this. He hadn't thought of an excuse if this exact situation happens. He could just lie about it being a quirk, but his teacher is Eraserhead, a person who knows how to erase quirks. His lie would be known immediately. He could also just tell them his conduit status, but that could end badly. He saw how the staff would glare at him because they already know his status. As he was about to tell them the lie, a thought entered his mind. Lying won't do anything good. And judging how Aizawa emphasized the word quirk earlier, Izuku knew that he already knew. The man just wanted him to confirm it. So why was he trying to lie about his status? Why would he hide the fact that he is a conduit? Didn't he want to be the first conduit hero? Only one answer to that: fear. Fear of getting rejected. Fear of being hurt. Fear of not having anyone to trust. And fear of being alone again. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want to experience that again. Not now. Not now that he is one step closer to becoming the hero he always wants to be. But he had to take risk. It's better this way. Because this way, he would see who will be the people who would accept him as a whole. He will be able to see who would be there for him when he ever needed someone to lean onto. To count on and love him for who he is, even if he is a conduit. Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes. Now or never, I'm a conduit. 3 simple words, but felt like the biggest confession to make. It didn't felt bad saying it, but the fear was still there. He then slowly looked up and saw what he already predicted. His classmates looking at him with mixed expressions. Curiosity, confusion, shock, disgust, anger, and hate. All of them giving him those expressions, and some were even looking at him with suspiciously while stepping away from him. Izuku sighed at this and looked away from his classmates' stares as he exited the circle. It was all starting again just like in middle school. As Izuku looked away, that's when 2 separate figures lunged their way towards the young conduit. They were Katsuki and Ida, both glaring at the mophead. the blonde in a punching form while the blue-haired teen was in a kicking form. 𝐶𝐮𝐫𝐭 terrorist freak. /begone conduit some. They said as they collided with Izuku. At least that's what they thought they did when Izuku suddenly turned into smoke and dashed away from the two. This resulted to a collision, a nasty one. The class were shocked at the two students' display of aggression toward Midoriya. Some of them were about to intervene when the conduit suddenly turned to smoke and evaded the attack, causing the two to land their attacks on each other. The class cringed when they heard the two attacks landed with a sick impact. Falling down on the ground, the two boys clutching on their respective body parts where the attacks landed. Katsuki on the side of his head and Ida on his stomach. Their pained expressions were interrupted, however, when Aizawa's bandages wrapped the two together. The pro-hero then walked to the two and glared daggers at them. This is your only warning, or I will expel you. You will not attack another student again, whether they are a quirk user, quirkless, or a conduit. You got that? Aizawa said angrily as he tightened the grip on his bandages, causing the two to groan out a yes. Sighing, he turned his head to the blonde who was glaring deadly at the conduit, who being tended to by Uraraka and slightly blushing on the close contact. Katsuki Bakugo, detention. 1 week. He said to the blonde, using his quirk to prove his point. The blonde just scoffed angrily, but nodded, albeit begrudgingly. Sighing for the umpteenth time today, he let the two idiots go, not without a warning glare, and turned to the rest of the class to look at Izuku. Nodding to the greenette, he spoke up. Thank you for giving us that information, Midoriya. Now putting that aside, Aizawa said, making the students look over at him. It's important for us to know our limitations, may it be a quirk or any type of power in you, as long as we know how to channel it properly. He was holding the device in his hand and showing his students Izuku's score. Everyone in the class minus Izuku widened their eyes. 4,828, 03M, as if forgetting the earlier event, the tense atmosphere broke. 4 kilometers. That's so manly. We can really use our quirks now. That's the hero course for you. This is totes exciting, / this is going to be fun. And like that the atmosphere changed again. Why do I hear boss music? Izuku thought as a chill ran into his spine. Fun, you say? Aizawa said ominously as his hair shadowed his face. All of you came to you, to have some fun. What happened to becoming a hero? After he said that, the crowd of students began to sweat nervously. If that's the case, then, new rule, the student who ranks last in total points will be expelled instantly. That caused a shock expression to the students. Expulsion. The majority thought in panic. Welcome to the hero course. 𝐮𝐻𝐷 grin plastered on the underground hero's face. Our freedom means we dispense students as we please. That's unfair. Uraraka protested only to receive a glare from the pro. Natural disasters, accidents, villain attacks, all kind of calamities can happen when we least expect it. Unfair does not pose as a valid reason. He said seriously. It's our job to reverse it all. So if you are hoping for a fun time, I suggest you leave. Because in the next 3 years, all you can expect from your life in you is one hardship after another. I expect you all to overcome these trials and climb to the top, plus ultra style. In seconds, Izuku calmed himself and looked at Aizawa with a determined look. Izuku was then called out by Aizawa and walked towards the starting line for his turn on the 50-meter dash. So far, heat tests had been very onto his favor. First was the softball pitch, obviously. He had scored second only below Ochako that had scored infinity after she made the ball weightless and threw it until it exited the Earth's atmosphere. Katsuki as in third after scoring 705. 2M, which didn't suit well for the blonde who was seething in rage as he glared at Izuku. Said Greenette just ignored him as if he wasn't even there. Second, standing long jump, where Izuku was able to clear the test using his double air dash and smoke thrusters to keep himself airborne. Bakugo also cleared the test, similar to Izuku's way but by using his palms as thrusters of his explosions to propel him to the other side of the sandbox, clearing the test. Another Izuku noticed was a girl with vines as hair, Ibra Shizuki, using said vines too as if it were her feet and walked to the end of the box. It was actually a clever way to clear the test. Third test was the grip test. He cleared the test with 218.1 kilogram. It was a great record compared to Katsuki's, who was forced to be failed after destroying 3 dynamometers when he couldn't get a higher score than Izuku. The one that caught Izuku's attention in this test was the tall boy with 6 webbed arms, who scored 540 kilograms. That boy was 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐸 Shoji. Next, repeated side steps, the one Izuku actually had trouble clearing. He had to using his thrusters repeatedly to do the test. Iida was the one who got first, when he used his engines to speed up his side steps. Second place went to the grape-headed midget, name he didn't bother knowing, that Izuku saved in the entrance exam, who used his ball to his advantage. And Izuku can respect that. Seated toe touch and sit-ups didn't really felt difficult. Due to his regular habit of free running and parkour for the last 10 months, his body had been a lot more flexible than he used to be. Distance run, Izuku had fun doing this test. Again, because of his free running and parkour, he was able to gain high stamina and endurance. Plus his conduit abilities that doesn't need much smoke to be used, like smoke dash, he was basically a stamina freak. He was second in this test, only behind Momo Yaoyorozu, the raven-haired girl with a ponytail, suddenly created a skateboard with turbo engines, and third was Iida, who Izuku now saw was glaring daggers at him. Bioterrorist freak. Izuku heard Katsuki growl out with hate, snapping him out of his thoughts. Looking around, he noticed that he was in front of the 50-meter dash course. Beside him was his former childhood friend Katsuki, glaring angrily at him. Izuku ignored the blonde as he assumed a running stance as 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻 just crossed his arms, palms facing away from his face. Small pops began to appear on his palms. As Aizawa starts the timer, 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻 propelled himself across the field with the help of his explosions acting as thrusters again. As he was halfway through the field, a cloud of smoke suddenly passed him and made it near the finish line before the blonde was. Katsuki speed and powered up his explosions to propel faster. Izuku saw this and used double air dash to pass the finish line. Only for a second or so 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻, looking tired and exhausted, passed the finish line. They both look at their results. Izuku Midoriya, 3:44 seconds. Katsuki 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻, 4:13 seconds. Izuku smiled at the test results and made his way near the group, leaving a yelling 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻. And then waited for Aizawa to show the results. The man coughed to stop 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻 from his yelling and looked at the class. Time for the results, he said as he took out the device in his scarf and pressed it. His declaration made some of the students flinch. The total is simply the combination of your individual scores. One-by-one recitation is illogical, so here they are, he said lazily before pressing a button, and there appeared a hologram to pop out of the device. Looking at the results, Izuku sighed and quickly looked down. Of course he was last. He doesn't have a quirk. He was visibly shaking and Uraraka was about to approach him, when he only shifted away from the group. This made the girl frown a bit, look down as well. Aizawa saw this and immediately felt a little bad for Midoriya. Good thing he wasn't going to expel anyone this year, seeing they had a lot of potential in them. Especially Izuku. So much potential seeping out of the boy's aura, conduit or not. As Aizawa was about to reveal the logical ruse in the test, when Izuku walked to the center, right in front of the man. And to his surprise, the boy suddenly bowed to him. "Thank you for your time. I'll be taking my leave now," Izuku said as he smiled at the man. "I wonder if Shiketsu or Ketsubutsu accepts conduits," he whispered to himself as he started walking away from the group. From the corner of his eye, he could see the reactions of the other students. Uraraka was somewhat crestfallen. Yaoyorozu was also disappointed but didn't show it much. The girl with red spiky hair was a bit down for some reasons. Girl with frog similarities just looked at him with interest. The girl with weird but somewhat cute earlobes was looking at him from the corner of her eyes while twirling her index finger on one of her earlobes. Iida was glaring at him, but a look of relief can be seen. The girl with two-toned hair was looking at him blankly. And finally, 𝐒𝐵𝐽𝐻 has smirka etched on his face but was still giving off an angry aura around him. The walking C4 bomb's expression irritated Izuku but didn't do a thing about it. He just continued to walk away. Well, that was until bandages wrapped his body. He was pulled back to his spot and looked at the eraser head with visible confusion. Before he could ask the pro hero, a sh-eating grin appeared on the man's face. "I'm sorry, Midoriya, but you're not expelled." His grin widened to a creepy way before continuing, his statement causing confusion to the class. It was a logical ruse to push you all to your limits. First, there was silence, but then, WH yelled out the majority of the class, unable to hold back their disbelief towards their teacher. "Come on guys, use your brains." "Of course it was just a logical ruse," said Yaoyorozu in a matter-of-fact tone, hand on her hips. "Looks like she knew all along. Anyway, you can change to your uniforms and go back to class. Grab the curriculum sheets on the table in the classroom. See you later," he said after letting Izuku go as he left the class to go back and change. Izuku, however, stayed for a bit, staring at the place where the man used to be, clenching and unclenching his hands. It wasn't a logical ruse. He whispered and paused as he looked at the retreating the form of the Shota Aizawa. He was looking straight at me when he talked about expulsion. Taking a deep breath, Izuku turned away and made his way to change back to his school uniform. Not seeing Aizawa pulling out the same device, deleted the fake results and clicked the real results of the quirk apprehension test. First, Izuku Midoriya second, Momo Yaoyorozu third, Shoko Todoroki fourth, Katsuki Bakugo fifth, Tenya Ida sixth, Ibra Shiozaki seventh, Fumikage Tokoyami eighth, Mizo Shoji ninth, Mashareo Ojiro 10th, Eiji Kirishima 11th, Mina Ishido 12th, Ochako Uraraka 13th, Koji Koda 14th, Rikido Sato 15th, Tsuyu Azui 16th, Hanta Siro 17th, Denki Kaminari 18th, Kyoka Jiro 19th, Kami Utsushimi 20th, Minoru Mineta. He stared at the results as smirked. "For someone who's supposed to be a dangerous bioterrorist, you are quite different from the usual conduits I encounter, Izuku Midoriya. I look forward teaching you on becoming a hero," he said to himself and continued to walk back to the teacher's lounge. "This year is going to be interesting.